Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the work session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, September the 10th, 2024. We're going to call the meeting to order. We're going to call the roll. Alderman Barnhill.
Here.
Alderman Blanton. Here. Alderman Caesar.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger. Not here. Alderman Vice Mayor Brown.
Present.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor's here. Okay. Next item is opportunity for citizen comments, and these are for opportunities to speak on items not on this agenda. And I don't have any speaker cards for that, so we'll continue to move forward, and we'll go to Executive Order 2024-01, an order regarding the declaration by the mayor of the city of Franklin for an emergency water shortage status 1.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. Michelle Hatcher, our Director of Water Management, is with us as well. This is a declaration that the mayor issued last week, but what we do when an emergency declaration happens is bring it to the board at the next available meeting. We are essentially following our drought management plan. And as you know, the city of Franklin has two water sources. About 2/3 of our water comes from water that's pumped down from the Harpeth Valley Utility District, from water treated from the Cumberland River. And then the other third is water we treat that we draw from the Harpeth River. And we have been unable to draw from that river for some time. And the community has not had a significant rain event since July 4th. We've had a couple small rain events since then, but of any significance, it's been over 2 months. So that has stretched that resource in particular, and we are following the steps of that drought management plan, which calls for these measures. I'll let Michelle touch on it. Our team is working hard to make sure we are getting water into the system as best we can and keep our tanks as full as we can. But this is the necessary steps driven by the plan that we have developed and that the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation has approved. So Michelle, feel free to fill in anything else that should be touched on.
Eric pretty much covered most of it. So we, if you remember last year, we did a lot of kind of system modifications, and we changed the way that we operated to kind of prolong our water supply. So we have done all those, and so we're kind of really in this dire situation. If you also remember last year, it was right after the election, so we have kind of moved up. That was all we've kind of moved up a month, so hopefully we don't continue to show that trend in future years. But we've also submitted the revised drought management plan in June, and so we're still waiting to hear back from TDEC if it's been approved. And once it gets approved, obviously it'll need to be approved by you all, so we'll come back for that too. But I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Alderman Caesar.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Eric, for enlightening us on the announcement. I was listening to some of the local radio, not AM radio, but FM radio, and they kind of accused us of poor planning and this water drought situation, the water situation being a function of allowing overdevelopment and overbuilding. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are educating us, and this is actually quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's the result of good planning and being proactive when unique and unexpected weather events happen in our area. And I want to send a word of appreciation to you and the staff and previous boards for putting together a proper water management plan so that we can avoid some of the downstream effects that would likely happen if this drought were to continue and we weren't as aggressive as we have been. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is driven by weather conditions, but we do have a plan in place. We have learned every time we've gone through this, and it doesn't happen every year. Before this year and last year, it's probably been 8 or 9 years since we had something of that magnitude. So you can't control that aspect, but what you can control is your ability to respond, spread the resource out. We've learned a lot in terms of our ability to push Harpeth Valley water deeper into our system to maintain storage levels in our tanks. So we're in decent shape, but we need to take the precautions now, and our plan indicates that we need to take these measures now to restrict unnecessary usage at this point. So we appreciate the support. We have seen a reduction in demand in the last several days. That probably has more to do, quite frankly, with the weather cooling down than it has to do with these measures, but probably they both help. We're keeping an eye on things. The forecast does show some potential for rain for 2 or 3 days near the end of this week. So that would be some welcome relief, but our team is monitoring it closely, and pushing water into the system everywhere we can to make sure we have support for those necessary water usages that are critical for the community.
And we do have kind of not a tank, but we have an extra place from
Reservoir.
Harpeth Valley. Yeah, no, for Harpeth Valley to have extra water for us, you know.
So you mean other than that? So we have two vaults in which we
Two
pull
vaults,
water in.
yeah,
Is that
thank
what
you. Yes.
So what we actually did last year, one of the modifications is there was a bypass line, and we actually put a meter there that we could open up so it could accurately, monitor the flow. So we've done some in preparation for this. We don't use it all the time. It's kind of just in this scenario.
Okay, we'll keep moving along. Development report, we're going to defer that. We're rechecking some numbers on that, and we'll bring that back to you. Item 3 is City of Franklin contract number 2024-199, interlocal agreement between Williamson County, Tennessee, and the City of Franklin, Tennessee, to establish the terms, responsibilities, obligations of the city providing funds received from the national opioid settlements to the county to be allocated for opioid abatement and remediation projects that impact the city. So,
This is something the mayor and our city attorney have worked on with the county to look at ways to route our dollars into a process that the county has identified to look at grant opportunities to make the most effective use of these opioid dollars. We've used it for some training and some supplies within our police department and for our first responders, but this is a great opportunity to leverage dollars with the county into services that can help address opioid-related needs and responses.
and our dollars are small compared to what the county's receiving, so it's good to tag along with them. Item 4 is a new wine and grocery store license for MAPCO Express, doing business as MAPCO number 3326, Marvin Hewitt, Scott Moon, and Bruce Thatcher, managing agents, 240 Franklin Road. Any question about that one? Okay, we'll now go to consideration to deny sewer availability for Skylight Ranch, 2051 Wilson Pike. Coming back is Michelle.
This has come through to you a couple different times.
We'll call you up when it's time, Mr. White.
And
But
we
you're
have-
welcome to, wait a minute.
This has come before you a couple different times, and of course, we did the enhanced or updated basin study that we shared with you a meeting or two ago. That helped us shape this. Mr. White came to the Capital Investment Committee a couple weeks ago and expressed his interest to pursue this. He did modify his application slightly. We added, made a late addition to your agenda materials to reflect that. And as we've shared with you, our general recommendation is to not do the denial, but if you choose to do the denial, we recognize that, and we've worked with Mr. White on specific conditions that would make sure we're able to continue to provide service to the rest of the basin, and that this can move forward in a way that both serves his needs, but also enables us to serve the broader area of the city, should other property owners want to, of the region, to other property owners want to tie into the sanitary sewer service. So, Michelle, anything you want to add specifically?
Yeah, so as we talked about in CSA, I know this is new for some of you all, we are recommending, let's see, denial of the denial. It gets a little bit confusing with the wording there. So we are recommending that they connect to the sewer system. There is, it's kind of with the greater of way that we looked at the master planning for Maze Creek. I know we have delayed this a little bit in order to get a better handle on Maze Creek. We have some interceptor locations that are going through his property or going through this parcel. If the board chooses to deny his, to approve his denial, to grant his denial. Then there are just some specific questions, or not questions, but conditions we would like to add to that. And those are, the typical availability and annexation agreement that we typically require for all of these parcels. Then that availability agreement would kind of outline some of the conditions, as we are not responsible for maintaining his system. When he does connect to the system, that he's responsible for all charges at that time. So if we increase impact fees, he's responsible for those charges at that time. And that we get, so upon development of the property, we like to be able to review the site plans and grading to ensure that all of our easements are not encumbered by structures or other types of, fill and other things that are on top of them. And then also that he donates all of those easements to us to kind of make sure we have a plan for the future. So those would all be included in the typical availability agreement that we do. Most of y'all have seen that. We do typically do them at CIC, but those, they get brought in front of you as items on behalf. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can invite the applicant up.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor. And Mr. White, you can come on up, and I'm going to give you a limited amount of time tonight because I think everybody's very familiar with your project.
I think, because we have talked about this a few times, I know Mr. White's been willing to not only grant those easements, donate those easements. I know a lot of those conditions are willing to meet in that regard. We definitely, but
The word is grant easements.
grant easements, sorry.
Go ahead and sit down, Mr. White.
And then,
Please.
but my question, I guess, was he can still come in later if he wanted to, right? He just has
Sure.
to pay those fees at that time that he actually gains access. But as long as we have access to that line coming through there to be able to put that through, but he can come in at any time.
You mean
Correct.
connected to the system? Yes,
Yes.
correct. Yeah.
Anybody else?
It's just
Alderman
it's like
Peterson.
116 acres and 23 dwelling units. So, I mean, that's like 5 units the acre. I mean, they're not planned to be 5-acre lots for all of them, but I'm just saying,
Well, is it time for me to talk?
sure.
So when
I'm
you,
going to limit you to about 2.5 minutes, Mr. White.
just to respond to that, yes, 23 houses, but that's up to. We don't think that we'll build 23. I mean, we really want to make this the most exclusive neighborhood in the Williamson County is our idea. And basically to kind of be a museum for the community, to preserve a way of life that our family's always engaged in. And so, I mean, we're not looking at this. I mean, obviously, we expect to make money, but as much as anything, our desire is to preserve a way of life that has always existed in this county, make Millionaires Row again. And so that's all I have to say.
Okay. Alderman Barnhill.
You listen to the conditions in order to have the denial voted in your favor, or you in agreement with the conditions?
I heard the word donate. That's the only thing I have a question
The appropriate
about.
term would be grant easements.
Dedicate the easements.
Yeah,
to
dedicate
us.
the easements, yes.
Yes,
No
we're
monetary change.
Yeah.
we're totally in agreement.
Anybody else?
And the city doesn't think that that's going to limit, because that will give us everything we need to not limit the access to the parcels north.
Yeah, that was kind of the purpose of doing our update. The plan needed to be updated as well, but we wanted to be certain that alignment would be what serves the rest of the basin and that we didn't inadvertently prevent others from being able to tie into the system. So yes, our review identified this as the best path.
On all of those, let's see, the request here would be if the applicant's denial request be granted, then their list there is what they're expecting to get out of this.
You know, and I think this really comes down to a question of whether the city's going to administer this Maze Creek Basin or the county is. As you know, we strongly favor the city staying involved. I mean, to me, this is going to be the biggest development left to happen in Williamson County. And there's a lot of people that want to build high density. We want to go the other direction. We want to go as low a density as economics will allow. And I think it's good for the city to do that.
Alderman Potts.
Thanks. I just had a question for Michelle. And Michelle, I'm sorry, my map's not pulling up here on my screen, so I'm looking at the one that's on the wall here. regarding, and this follows what Alderman Baggett was just asking about, that branch coming off of, I guess, the primary that kind of runs north to south, if you will.
This
Are you
intersection?
yes.
And this
Are you
branch.
thinking that that one right there, where you go into the red border, that that would be a final branch that would be developed? Or do you have any plans as far as timelines on any of this?
So that's kind of the guessing game, right? This is the larger part of the Maze Creek Basin that is still not been developed yet. So we've
Right.
not laid any sewer lines. We've not done anything. The reason we want to maintain the access to those easements is for that exact purpose, right? In case the board ever decides to move into this area.
And that's going to be driven by development
Yep.
that comes before you as well. So it's going to be a combination of what we're able to do and what development would drive and help put in place.
And do you have any concerns regarding any need for any additional pumps or any other structures other than an underground line in that area?
Not in this area. So that was the reason we took a little bit longer to do that basin study was we also did, if you remember, we did profiles as well, so how deep lines were. So what we've typically done is we've just gotten like a 10-foot easement on each side of the pipe, which is not enough when a line is 20 feet deep, right? So now we know the correct size of easement that we need to be able to maintain that line when we get to that point.
And so, again, just to reiterate, as we've gone through this, staff is recommending the denial of the request.
Typically, what staff would do is we would recommend that ultimately they tie into the system.
Right.
Should you want to grant the denial, we have provided you with 5 conditions that we would say you should put in place.
I just want to make sure
Yes.
everybody's hearing the same
Yep.
thing. As we started this conversation, there was some,
The ultimate is to tie into the system, but that may not meet the timing that Mr. White or his family has in mind. This would provide an option should you decide to grant the denial. But we would say you absolutely should have those 5 conditions in place.
Go ahead, Alderman Baggett.
So owners of all properties created as a result of this project will be required to pay all fees at the time of connection to the city sewer. I can see in 20 years that Jimmy and Sally who have a house there and they, think about some of these other special utility district kind of things. Not utility district, but special assessments that we've had. And here we are up here and we're hearing how terrible it is that these homeowners have got sewage coming, through their, failing. And here we are, good-hearted aldermen and trying to fix their, problem. And we're on the hook for that. Could there be could be something recorded in the deed or can that be codified somewhere other than in our ordinances that that property owner would, does that make sense? Because does that make sense? Can you put that into
I believe these conditions would be recorded.
Yes.
on the site or
Yeah,
for the
so what we
property?
typically do is record those agreements against the plat.
Okay.
Yeah, and typically when you
That's
do
all.
a special assessment, that cost is shared by the property owner.
Right, it is.
It's not, you
We just
facilitate
did it
but-
cheaper. Yeah, or we just we did it
Yeah.
ourselves because
The example we just did was a small one where it made sense for us to do, but ultimately, those property owners are paying
paid
for
for it.
those
They
costs.
are. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, we'll go to item 6, which is discussion of sanitation and environmental services operations alternatives.
So as our sanitation environmental services team is coming up, just a couple words to set it up. When we went through the last budget process, we had a pretty involved discussion around our rates and our rate structure. The long-term guidance or direction that we have had, which is to make this a self-sufficient service to our residents. And so the rate plan and rate structure that we brought forward reflects that, but also reflects some pretty significant cost increases in that system across our region as landfill space is more scarce and those costs drive up. So in response to that dialogue and a desire to see what are better ways or options, what options might there be to manage those costs for residents or to differentiate the level of service or different elements of that, we wanted to bring forward to you some concepts and get some feedback. And then our work over this next year would be to evaluate those options and bring forward more developed options for you. But we also want to get some direction. If there's some things you don't want to see us do or you don't think are a productive approach, we want to hear that up front as opposed to spending time and effort on something that might not be the right direction. So this is to give you a little more in-depth context and then talk about some of the concepts that we can look at. We've done a little bit of preliminary work on some of those, but it's really important to help shape that work in the next several months as we jump into it. So we've got Mark, Jack, and Chris with us tonight to talk about that. So I'm not sure who's next, but take it away.
So thank you. Appreciate the time. We wanted to kind of go back through some history at the Sanitation Environmental Services Department. I know some of you are relatively new, but wanted to make sure that this information gets put out to you all. So the services we currently offer for residential customers is weekly MSW and curbside recycling services. There is backdoor service for those who have, for customers who do have a medical condition. We also provide bulky item and white good collection and disposal on a weekly basis, brown bag collection, as well as brush collection, all on a weekly basis. Some of the things that we've done over the years, it dates back. This goes back to 2008. To improve the way we operate, to improve the services we provide, to improve efficiencies. And I'm not going to read all of this, so you're welcome unless you want me to. But I wanted to just touch on a handful of things. So we started our first pay-as-you-throw program with the Bucket Bag program back in 2009. We get about 1,900 Bucket Bag stickers that we do every year. So it's not widely used, but people do use it. Also in that year, in November, we started the BOPA drop-off site. And then we had the first curbside recycling service start in 2010 with the Blue Bag recycling. In 2014, there was a lot of effort looking at efficiencies. So we implemented RouteSmart, which is really a routing software, and it essentially does a turn-by-turn for all the trucks to go to their stops. 2019, we eliminated commercial dumpster service simply because it wasn't an efficient use of the dollars, the customer dollars. And then in 2020, January, we started the implementation of the Blue Bin service. And as you know, shortly thereafter, COVID came to town, and that was interesting. We had a really earnest effort to go to really fully automated services at that point to avoid, not only back injuries and things like that associated with picking up bags off the ground and things, but really we didn't know what the pandemic held for us. So we were trying to limit contact as much as possible. And then in August 2020, we implemented call-in services for bulky items and white goods, and that was really to focus in on where the trucks needed to go. Prior to that, they were essentially following the trash trucks, and it was a pretty efficient use of time and equipment. Wanted to touch on the staffing levels and the key milestones. Prior to 2011, our fleet department or division was part of Sanitation and Environmental Services. So FY 2011, those were moved to the Streets Department as a new division. And you can see in the chart to the right that you'll see the staffing drop off in the SES department pretty considerably. In 2013, there was a decision to move to a contracted hauling services. And again, you see a minor reduction in the staffing at FY 2013. And then FY 2015, we went to 4-day work week in the collections division, which has brought some efficiency, keeps them out on the road for 10 hours a day, and some benefit to the workers as well. So one thing I'd like to point out too is that we had a great deal of temporary staff expenses. That's the far right column. Also during the pandemic, we worked to reduce that because getting staffing in, unknowns, a lot of unknowns associated with that. So we were able to essentially eliminate temporary staff expenses. The staff expenses you see currently are for administrative staff for one of our folks who are on an extended leave. But as you can see, the staffing levels have maintained pretty modest increases over the years. And then that's a lot to do with the automation that we've moved to, and then really the efficiencies that we touched on the previous slide. Some of the diversion strategies, and I'll acknowledge that the top one is not an SES strategy, but we do bulk leaf collection. There's about 60,000 cubic yards of leaves that were collected over the past 5 years, and that equates to about $600,000 in savings, landfill tipping fee savings. Another diversion is BOPA, which is batteries, oils, paint, and antifreeze. Paint, antifreeze, and electronics. That's been a pretty popular program. They do a lot of electronics recycling, and we'll touch on this a little bit shortly. And then, of course, this curbside recycling program. We also do a fair amount of recycling of the white goods that we collect as well. So, some of the diversion stats, and I apologize, the top graph where it shows the wood waste, that's actually a calendar year, so it's not the fiscal year. So in 2023, it was a 604 tons that we ran through, and as of the date this chart was made was several months ago, it was 178 tons. The chart below, this is the BOPA numbers that we see. I do want to draw your attention to the paint in pounds. In 2020, we were recycling both oil-based paint as well as latex paint. Latex paint can go into a landfill, and it's actually, that's the recommended. You dry it up and you put it in the trash and it goes to the landfill. So we eliminated, that's why you see that number drop considerably. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on, we've mentioned this previously. We've had 3 citizen surveys over the past 8 years or so. One of the things that we've continued moving down the path of the services we've provided simply because the survey results are generally positive. These are just a quick summary of the results from 2016, 19, and 22. Yeah.
And I will tell you, compared to peer cities, this is well above what you see a lot of other cities achieve for this same service. So it speaks highly for our team in that regard.
As far as residential service breakdown and fixed costs versus volumetric costs, we've touched on this before. There's about a 15% cost associated with the volume of trash. And again, this is just residential trash, not including trash that comes over from commercial haulers over our scales. And the fixed cost is about 85%. And this was the table that, a summary of the information that we had shared previously, where we view the cost of disposal and hauling to go up, up through FY 32. And this estimate anticipates a 5% increase year over year based on a CPI index. It is an indexed rate currently. So that's just, so in 2032, we're looking at a total hauling and disposal cost of about $77.50 a ton. All right, so before we kind of get into this next sort of segment, I wanted to see if there's any questions or comments or thoughts to share before we keep moving.
Go ahead, Alderman Caesar.
I just had one question. Thank you, Mark, for putting this together. This is really good information, and I've been familiar with the sanitation services since probably 2010, or when I finished Citizens Government Academy, which I encourage you all, if you haven't gone through it, you should. I'm curious why the 2019 survey, and even prior in 16, the recycling saw such a significant drop in excellent or good service, even after introducing the blue bin. program. I would have thought the inverse would have been true because of the hassle of the blue bags. But
Right.
curious to see if you have any insight there.
Well, there's a couple things at play here. One of the things that we were trying to get away from was having workers on the backs of trucks jumping off, throwing bags and cardboard, all sorts of stuff in the back of the rear lift. It's a cause of a lot of injuries. What it essentially does is it minimizes the amount of recycling you could do on a weekly basis. The other piece too, and I think it's largely related to cardboard recycling, there's limitations in getting cardboard into the bin. And we run into...
I have some boxes at my house
Yeah.
that I'm waiting for next week. Yeah.
Yeah, so that I believe is what drove it. Jack, I don't know if you've got any, it seems to be.
It's kind of an educated guess, but that is the most common frustration we hear is it's hard to put all the cardboard if you have a lot of cardboard in just the bin, and we do limit what we collect to the bin. When you had blue bag, you could stack cardboard and put bags on top, which was very convenient, but had other implications for operations and for our folks, et cetera. So we think that's what probably caused that change, because it's a little more limiting in how much you can put out, especially with cardboard.
And we haven't gotten to the potential solutions, but with Amazon not looking like it's going to get less frequently, become a less frequent visitor to my house, being able to use those boxes and dispose of boxes is something I hope we're thinking of as well.
We are thinking about that. You'll notice 2022, a lot of people were working remotely. They were buying everything from Amazon. Not everything. Sorry, I'm not trying to do an Amazon plug, but they're doing a lot of online ordering, and the box volume is just through the roof. So one of the things that we've been kind of contemplating is there good locations that we can closely monitor, where we can have people bring cardboard recycling to us. We've got a number of Williams County convenience centers, but none of them are in the city of Franklin proper. So that's, unfortunate, but.
Because of the distance is why they're sitting in my garage, right? I'm waiting for next week. And,
Right.
yeah.
So that's the best I can do as far as an answer. And again, I think Eric educated.
It makes a lot of
guesses
sense.
probably.
Thank you for that.
So.
We also put a lot more emphasis on 1 and 2 plastics and cardboard and
Yeah, that-
paper, which may have
That's a good
changed a
point.
little bit too.
That's true. So prior to, several years back, there was China essentially stopped taking recyclables from the U.S. unless it had a certain amount of, it had to be very clean. The contamination, unachievably clean. So, thank you, Jack. So one of the things we really started marketing and pushing is that we limited the plastics that we accept, and it's 1 and 2 plastics, because essentially at this point the other recyclables are not really recyclable in the markets that our recycling center deals with. So that's a big part of it as well. So thanks for bringing that up here.
Alderman Peterson?
The other, now we have so much more in our blue bin than we have in just the regular garbage can, but one of the things is my family has been taught how to break down the boxes and fold them up, which makes a huge difference in how much you can get into that. So that really helped us a lot. But as I say, we always have more in the blue bin now than we have in the other one. I mean, twice as much.
Sound like a good commercial opportunity, filming Ann and her family breaking the
Breaking those
boxes.
boxes down.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Thank you. So we wanted to kind of put in front of you a number of different options that we've been thinking about, and we continually think of ways to improve our service. And wanted to get your feedback because, as Eric had mentioned, we're going to be going back and either doing analysis in-house, hiring someone to support us in this effort, but wanted to kind of focus the efforts versus kind of doing the sort of the shotgun blast and spending a ton of resources where you may not want to go. So I wanted to kind of run through these in blocks and then maybe get some feedback and we can go from there. So one of the things we've heard from you all is pay-as-you-throw pricing. There's different ways to do it. There's pros and cons to each way you do it. Container size is one way. We have a 96-gallon cart. You can potentially offer different size carts. I will add that one thing to consider is if you have a side loader set up for a 96-gallon cart, you may be tossing the 32-gallon carts in the back of the hopper. So it's a tension thing in the arm. So that's one of the things to consider. So with all of these options, there's all these little nuances to it that we'll have to explore. So another one is by weight. Some of the research that Chris has done is that there's a fairly significant error associated with doing it by weight. Again, that's something we'd have to explore a little more deeply. Other programs use special bags that they buy from local businesses, and you essentially buy the bags. The company that sells them reimburses the city for the bags, and we go pick up whatever they put in. So for regular trash. And so I suppose you could do it for recycling too. We haven't dug in too deeply. A concern that we've read about this one, though, is that you'll have illicit bags being used. So just
Yeah.
counterfeit, whatever you want to call them. So yeah, go ahead.
Also, with that one, when you decide to go up on your bag cost, people will hoard bags. So a couple of the communities that I looked into, this is what happened. When they announced an increase in bags, they sold a ton of bags right before that and then none the next year. So that's just something to think of.
Just things we got to consider. So, yeah. Other options are, we currently have bulky and white goods pickup built into our municipal solid waste charge. So we could consider paying as you throw with respect to that. Also with yard debris. There's a note here about storm recovery. And when we do typically, and it's really a courtesy, is after a storm event comes through, we don't really charge for extra brush that gets put out to the curb because they're trying to recover from the storm event. So, and then one of the other ones is at-home composting for diversion of food waste. As you can imagine, food waste is actually pretty heavy. There's been programs that they've tried to do it to varying levels of success. So that's another potential option. So I wanted to stop there and pause and get any feedback from that piece. Yes.
Vice Mayor?
Sorry.
First of all, thank you for bringing these. I really do appreciate it. That was a very involved discussion, I think is the way you characterized it. And so I appreciate that we're even exploring these for sure. So from my vantage point, I have been intrigued by this container size for a while. I can appreciate the pole vaulting that may happen with smaller containers, but I think it's definitely one that I would like to see us explore and see what that does. The bulky, I think we offer people a lot of opportunity to, I think I make a dump run every single weekend. And so, there are alternatives for people to do that at no cost. So I think if that is one area that I wouldn't mind seeing us explore, if that recaptured some cost potentially. The weight intrigued me just because of the RFID technology is pretty inexpensive anymore, and it did seem like a path that could potentially take place, but I don't like the idea of faulty technology. So
what I read is that there's like a 5 to 10% error every month, and when you have 25,000 bills, that's what 250. The errors, billing errors every month potentially. The city that I looked at was much bigger, so it was like 10,000 a month.
I'll pull that off my list just on that fact right there. I guess the only other thing I had was so the bag tags. You mentioned that we started that 2019. Is that what you said? When did you say selling the bag tags, the dollar tag?
Buck a bag is older than that. 9.
I guess something I'd throw out there too is, have we done enough, especially as of late, to really educate around that program? Certainly, I think some of the scenarios that I talked about when we talked about the rate increase might very well have been, alleviated by simply buying some tags and tossing those. Do they still pay a rate?
That's for extra.
That's the extra.
That's
So is that similar to what you're saying about buying the bag? Is there an opportunity to do something with just buying, like if I get one bag a week, is there an opportunity to do that? Like instead of a bin?
So a lot of the communities I looked at that do pay as you throw, the recycling is free because that's what they really push. They encourage that. And then everybody pays for a bag. You have automated recycling and they pick up the pay as you throw with people. That way, because that's the only real way that I saw to verify that people were actually using
Using the right
right
bags,
bags. Because if it's in a container, it's very hard for the automated driver to see what's in the container.
Yep.
So that's how they would sell bags for between $1.50 and $3. They actually sold different sizes a bag, and that was the revenue they used to pay for the tipping.
So my final two are the container size. I think the bag tags could give somebody an opportunity if they did downsize their container to still add a bag if they needed to by buying those tags to compensate for the additional. And then the bulky, I'm up for looking at what that cost really is to us and if that helps us recapture for those people who are really tossing a whole lot more in bulk. So thank you for exploring them.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a question. Would you remind us all what size is the current black can that everybody's using?
96 gallons.
96 gallons? Okay. Yeah, I would entertain the container size as you're moving this forward. I don't know how the rates would have to be adjusted to, again, we're trying to break even here. So that's all we're trying to do. Is there, I don't see an option here regarding a larger blue bin to move to a 96, because what's the current size for the current blue bin?
It's 64.
It's 64.
And that's been a part of our discussions as well.
Is to move to a 96?
Yeah, and we're not sure when to pull the trigger on that. I think it largely depends on where we land after this conversation.
All right. And then lastly, and I didn't see it on here, so I just want to put this out. I've had some informal conversations with some county commissioners trying to figure out, like Alderman Brown was just talking about, taking that weekly run to drop off recycling, et cetera, is to partner up with the county for additional recycling locations. One that I've actually recommended is to see if we can find space right there at the Ag Center. And when I floated that across 3 different commissioners, informally, they said, well, that sounds like a good idea. I don't know what it would take to get that done. But I think that may also help us as well long-term. I know that we used to have one at 96 where the Kroger is. That one was removed in front of the Hobby Lobby. I don't know
Just have
what
2 or 3
takes.
across the city. Yeah. Well, that's a county decision,
Yeah, it
and
is.
we would certainly push them on that. We've made that request before, but we will renew that.
Okay.
And we have space that we could look at Century Court. We can make this fairly easy. I think the fact that we provide the high level of service that we do has in some ways made them think, well, let's put our focus on some other areas that has less service available to county residents. Well, we host BOPE. We do things that help the whole county. That is not just a city service, that's a countywide service. And I think it's a reasonable request for us to pursue some type of convenience center or centers that could address some of these larger needs in terms of recycling or other things that are in the waste stream.
Yeah, and it has to be a man center.
Yeah, there's a staffing component to all these.
Yeah, 'cause historically, years ago, the drop-offs were unmanned. They're still unmanned in Nashville, and they still have problems getting things that shouldn't be in there, bad things, so.
I would also suggest, if that fell through at the Ag Center, that if the salt storage facility moves forward near 65, near the Goose Creek area, that could also be an option. I don't know how that partnership would work regarding our current recycling program, but again, we're meeting the need of growth along another corridor there.
Alderman Baggett, now, well, I think I actually had Alderman Peterson, now I've got Alderman Baggett, then Alderman
Well,
Burton.
now, well, first of all, it is so great that we just have the, trucks that just pick up the containers and everything. That's made a huge difference, I would think, and they do a wonderful job on that. Just going down the list, weighing each bin every week and assigning a customer to a chip on the bin, I can't see. That sounds like, that it'd be a lot more trouble than it's worth to charge us all different amounts, because you'd have to take all the time to put all that together. I'm not sure on the special bags. Does that mean in addition to the regular garbage or to the recycle?
That's something we'd have to explore a little further.
It could be either.
I think it could be either, but I think the research we've done to date has been largely related to MSW.
Yeah, I didn't see a single community. I looked at like maybe 15 or 20 from the list that Alderman Berger gave, and none of them had pay-as-you-throw recycling. Like I said, recycling was like a policy decision up there, and it was mandatory in a lot of those communities. And so it was only pay-as-you-throw municipal solid waste. And I will say, what I don't think was in here was that even with pay-as-you-throw, they still had a setup fee. So it was between like $50 to $250 a year that everybody paid no matter what. And then it was still pay-as-you-throw.
And we found when we did Blue Bag that the bags were a hindrance in the processing because they were trash themselves, essentially. So I think it wouldn't be a great fit for recycling. The reason you do it is it's a way to approximate volume within the bins. So the more bags you use, the more volume you're representing. That's one way to look at it.
And
A big reason during COVID, we started actually looking at our current code and regulations, and historically we hadn't been great at enforcing. So, to our own department's detriment by spoiling people, picking up whatever was out there for a long time, we started following the regs. And that's a little bit for the downside, and probably the survey may have been a tick for that. Also, we found during COVID, we were already having to get temp help out of Nashville because we can't find labor here in Franklin. And we were getting very low quality workforce, and we're actually afraid of them half the time. It's not a good situation to be in. And I can tell you our workman's comp claims has fallen to practically zero. I think we had a guy this year slipped at one of the downtown festivals, but it wasn't from actually picking up something. But there's several reasons that anything that we do that's going to require manual labor is going to cost more.
Alderman
that is the
Baggett,
point.
I'm sorry, Alderman Baggett.
So I think this is all great conversation, and kind of going back to like why this started was the $8 a month, I think, increase. And what I can tell from the slide 4, which looks to be one of the most efficient, I don't know, maybe there's another department in the city that has reduced the kind of staffing, and as our population has grown, has become clearly more efficient. I mean, this should get a round of applause from every citizen because this is quite a feat. So kudos to you all. This is, I think, what people expect to see, and it's this technology and the various things that you all have implemented and gotten extremely efficient. I don't want to tinker with what's going on with this. Like we seem to be doing well in our operations, and I sense that some of the things that you outlined might actually throw a dent in some of these efficiencies that we've already achieved to get to these kinds of staffing numbers. And with the immense population growth, 56,000 and 90,000, so I'm very cognizant of not just the cost of I mean, if you do the actual physical RFID chips or bags or different containers and this and that, not being able to use the automation that we now have on all of our trucks that we've invested a lot of money into because they're too big, or we have to go retrofit and pay more money to get a 36 gallon, 60, whatever the gallons were, the smaller bins. And then those people can't go on the same routes anymore because, you know, my street only has two 32 ounce or gallon, whatever it is. You know, like this becomes logistically quite extensive. And so is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think that's the thing I keep going back to. But I am like Alderman Brown and others. I think that the charging for bulky white goods is something that could be on the table. I think most people probably go online to look to see if that's even possible. You know, now.
They don't even know.
Or what? I mean, I don't even know exactly what is able to be put out on the street. So I'm going to go to the city website and look. There's some things you can't, and so there's already probably you have to call exactly.
Make an appointment.
Like, what's that thing you walk on?
Treadmill.
Television.
So for all the treadmills, we'll charge for us to come pick up your treadmill, or whatever. Or you can't even do it. Okay, so well, it sounds like an opportunity. Maybe we could start charging a lot of money to pick up treadmills and take them somewhere. But in all seriousness, I think that is one where it is a really. I think there's some level of expectation with the community that you might, for large, bulky things, that you'd have to call and there might be a fee associated with it. So I don't know if that's a lot of money or not. Yard waste, I'm really hesitant to touch that because that is such a quality of life situation and people love it, and the weekly of that as well. I think that is something that people that really, really like. And it's good for the community, good for stormwater. There's all kinds of like ancillary benefits. So really, it's the yard waste. But I do think we could do more diversion, like Alderman Caesar brought up. I do think there is a lot of opportunity for community education and diversion, and yes to bigger recycling bins.
Alderman Berger. Alderman Berger.
Right. Yeah, the larger bins, absolutely. For me, and I think if we didn't do the yard waste, our community would look really different. Yes, I'm trying to find the word to say, but I think it would be very different if we did not have that service because it really helps keep our community in great shape. Just wanted to let you all know, there's two things. I'm still worried about I'm still concerned about people, the one person household and the one and two people households who generate very little trash sometimes. And a lot of those two people households and travel a lot too. And they don't, like my neighbor, he's 6 months out of the year, he's not even here. And he's paying the, so I don't know how we work that out, but I think we have to come up with some kind of clever way to address that. We have people who are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s still living at home, and many areas they still have homes, they have, or they've downsized, whatever, but they're not generating a lot of trash. And I don't know what we do about that. We've got to come up with some kind of solution, I think, there. And so I wanted to say that. And the other thing is, if you all remember Mr. James that came here, Randy James, he came to the Sustainability Commission. He had a prototype of like a storefront prototype, and you could put it next to a Kroger's or a Publix or someplace, and like in one of the shopping centers, and you can, some of these empty shopping centers and empty storefronts, you can get a hold of those, and then you just add this to the front, and you have your bins and you have your windows, and all you do is drive up and put your newspapers here, you put your glass here, you put your recycling here, whatever you have. And it goes into these huge bins behind the windows, and you have one or two people manning the entire center. They come and they take and wheel the bins when they get full, throw them in the back, and then they crush them, and then they bring them out, and they have trucks that pick them up. Anyway, he did a prototype. He's got his first prototype. Donnie just told me that the other day. And I don't know if y'all know, but the shredding place that we used to have over on Century Court, have you been there lately? It's gone. And we're going to have to go out this is going to be very inconvenient for everybody. We have to go out to Pinewood Road to take our shredding now. So I intend to go out there Wednesday, which is tomorrow, and he's invited me to look at the prototype. If by any chance this kind of thing would work, it'd be great to have around our city, and people could use that. I
We
mean,
need to move on, by the way. We've got,
Yeah, it's very clever, but y'all should be talking to him at some point.
quick comment, Alderman Peterson.
Yes. I guess this is number, page 9 or something. One of the reasons that things are changing is because the place that we're taking we're taking our, things and, is increasing 5% a year. That page 9 there? I mean,
The
this
landfill.
thing, see, that's one of the reasons that the cost is going up so much. It's because they are going to charge us a lot more. If you look, it goes from $25 up to $40 in less than 10 years.
And that's a great deal.
It is a great.
It actually controls that cost. I think you're going to see the market be significantly higher than these numbers, but we have,
But this
through what we've negotiated, kind of locked in a floor or ceiling, if you will, on those costs for us.
Okay, we've got a lot of presentations to go. My only 2 cents is that we got $8 million of fixed cost and a little over $1 million that we can toy with to try to reduce our fee. And that's not much wiggle room other than reducing services. So we need to keep moving. We're going to go to item 7, which is.
Wait, Mayor, there might be a couple more points that they wanted to make.
touch on a couple more?
We did not get through, we have another
Oh, I'm
slide or
sorry.
two. So
You're good.
jump
Okay.
in, Mark.
Sorry about
I'll go
that, Mark.
quickly. All right, so the next piece I wanted to touch on, I think, will be a quick conversation. Recycling, we currently do it weekly, as well as the yard waste, which I think we've gotten some feedback on, but also MSW is weekly. You know, if we reduce to bi-weekly, for example, there may be a way to reduce charges, but don't have a sense that we want to go in that direction.
Please.
Bernard. I think scheduling might be not in every single service we offer, but if we think about how we schedule with the streets department, and I know Steve's here with the leaf pickup, it is not, we've moved to a schedule, so it's not every week that you get your leaves picked up. And I think that there are cycles and seasons of when you're going to have more yard waste than others. So I think that in it of itself with the yard waste might be an area where we can kind of toggle with seasonally doing bi-weekly as opposed, not bi-weekly, yeah, bi-weekly as opposed to weekly, because it's not as much of a necessity. And I think with most anything, if we're requiring people to do yard waste in brown bags and or stack them neatly, most everybody can find a place to put it for an interim piece. And I think, to me, the yard waste moving to more seasonally and or bi-weekly when the season allows might help us in some way. That's all I have to say.
Okay, great.
All right, one more slide, real quick, sir.
Okay.
So one of the other things we wanted to talk about, and I think we've touched on this already, is opting out or doing like an a la carte menu of services. It sounds like there's stomach for some of that, but not necessarily all of that. Am I correct in saying that? The other piece is we've been exploring glass diversion for quite some time. That's a really tricky one. So we're going to continue looking at that. I know that's of interest for most, if not all of you. So we'll bring some potential options back. Jack is going to do a waste stream audit to understand what our trash actually looks like in terms of glass and paper and food waste, et cetera. And then the last piece that I think it was touched on a little bit ago, I think Alderman Berger mentioned, it was really policy discussions. And do we look at different charges for lower income people or veterans or elderly or whatever? So we intend on doing some research.
On that component, that is extremely administratively complex. You end up, how do you find out people's income levels? What we do right now piggybacks off an existing property tax relief program. That's great because it already exists and we can pull off of that. We don't have to go create or get data or validate something. So I see where that's going, but that is, I would just offer a comment that that's really challenging for us. The bottom line on what we're looking at, the ways to reduce costs get down to either reducing or eliminating or lessening a service level, reducing staff somehow as a companion potentially to that, or pulling out costs and itemizing it. This idea of an a la carte, that's no longer in your one fee. It's a separate fee that you pay as you incur the service. But all of that has to get us to a place where we can legitimately reduce the number of people and the number of expensive pieces of equipment going around the community every week. And a lot of these options don't necessarily do that. They might get at a volume piece, but you're still going by every house every week, and that is 85% of your cost. So we will certainly review these and go in more depth. We got some sense of some places you may be less comfortable going, in some areas that may be more palatable, and we'll do some more analysis. I think this waste audit might help us have a better handle too on what's coming through and how changes in service might affect that. So any other comments?
Yeah, just wanted to point out in reviewing sort of tipping fees in Middle Tennessee area, we're north of $80 per ton in the areas we've looked at. So I just wanted to make sure that.
But our costs are significantly less than that.
So I just wanted to.
Yeah.
I just want to say that relief program, it just affects people with certain incomes. And I'm telling you, there are people in their 80s and 90s living at home that you pick their trash up. One lady I know puts her trash out every other week. She doesn't have anything to put out. I mean, she eats out a bit and she has family.
We gotta
So
keep
We got to
moving.
figure that out.
Item 7, discussion of vesting rights and vesting extension requests.
We have folks from our planning team coming up to review this. One of the things you've seen pretty frequently over the last few years are vesting extension requests and those sort of components that come to you for decision. We wanted to walk through with you the guidance that's in state law, the practice that staff goes through and reviewing those and what comes to you, and seek some feedback on how that might work. This is a companion to the work we're looking at in terms of aligning our infrastructure planning and development activity with how we time all these out and support those needs in a growing community. So Amy's going to walk through this. It'll give you some basics and some framework, but we really want to hear from you if there are specific policy areas you'd like to hone in on, or that you'd like to give us guidance on, or you want to explore more completely as a board. So Amy, take it away.
That was a great introduction. Thank you. I'm going to just jump right in. No need to talk any farther about what I'm doing. So first, let me give you an overview of vested rights. It started with Tennessee Code Annotated 13-4-310. It took effect January 1st, 2015. And the real meat and potatoes of this rule, this legislation, is that the locally adopted development standards, which are in effect on the date of approval of a preliminary development plan, shall remain the development standards applicable to that property or building during the vesting period. That's the goal. So what the state legislature did was they threw out that 13-4-3-10. They talked about what is the start date of vesting, what milestones have to be met to maintain vesting. It also talks about what violations would terminate your vesting. It talks about when an approving body can reconsider vesting and when an approving body can extend vesting. So this is a typical timeline for a vested project. A project starts its vesting on the date of the final approval body's action. That's not always BOMA. Sometimes that is Planning Commission if it's a preliminary plat or a site plan that didn't need a PD zoning. Projects have to meet a milestone within 3 years. That first milestone means they have to obtain a site plan, they have to pull permits, and they have to begin site preparation. If they do those 3 things within 3 years of that start clock, they get an additional 2 years. And within that 5-year span, they have to do all of milestone 1, and then they have to commence construction and maintain their permits. That means one building, just one. They don't have to do the whole thing. They just have to get one building started. If they do that, then they get either 10 years or 15 years to complete everything on that plan. 10 years if it's a single phase project, 15 years if it's a multi-phase project. Okay. When projects are struggling to meet some of those deadlines, that's when we get into vesting extensions. Unfortunately, there's not much guidance in TCA about extensions. It does state that that it permits the local government to grant them, and it does say that it's granted by ordinance or resolution. The only other language in state law that talks about granting extensions, it states that granting extension, the basis for that is whether the local government determines in writing that it is in the best interest of the community to allow development to proceed. And that's all we got. No further discussion of what that means. So that's what we're working with in terms of state law. So let me give you just an overview quickly of what we do today in terms of tracking all of our vested projects. What we do is we have a database of all our vested projects and we look at it monthly. And by we, I mean me. It's just me. And so I do two things. First, I go through that database and I update all the projects when I know a milestone has been met. So I can keep track of that, which one is meeting their milestones and which ones aren't. I've listed here several things that I can quickly go and find in our different systems to tell me that it's met a certain milestone without having to go out and look at a site. But also, I live in the community. I drive around a lot, so I also just do spot checks. So as I'm looking at that database and I know I drove by a site yesterday and I saw rebar coming out of the ground, they're starting vertical construction, second milestone met. The other thing I do when I look at this database monthly is I look at those projects that don't have milestones that have been met. And I look, every month I look 6 to 7 months out to see if a project is in jeopardy of not meeting that milestone. Those projects I identify and I send letters. I send letters to the property owner, the developer, and the applicant listed on the vested plan, alerting them that they have this impending expiration that they should be aware of and take some action to do something about it. That template letter is attached to your civic clerk if you want to see just kind of what a property owner gets. Also, I keep track of who I've sent letters to, and if it's about 60 days out and I haven't heard from that project, I send them a sort of a drop-dead letter saying you really now have to do something or you're going to be in jeopardy of losing your vested rights. Also attached to your civic clerk was a list that we provided, I think, about a month ago of projects, sort of their status, the residential mixed-use projects, their status and their vesting timelines, the ones that are in different jeopardy of not meeting their milestones. Okay. So let's talk about logistics of a vesting request. Now that we're talking about, I've explained how I reach out to these applicants. Vesting expiration, you have to get your extension prior to your date of expiration. It's not backdated if you're in the process and asking for a request. If you pass your date, you're done. So there's a little bit of coordination to get into the system so that you can request your vesting on time. Because projects vesting requests do have to go through the same process that the original project got approved. So a vesting extension for a BOMA approved project has to go to Planning Commission first, get a recommendation, and then move on to BOMA for you to consider whether to grant it or not. And that just takes a little bit of time.
How much time? Couple of months, 2, 3 months?
Yes, I would say about that 60-day mark, it's about 45 to 50 days. So that's why I reach out 60 days to be like, I need a letter in like a week if you want to get this process adequate. And at the time, I always ask them for, please give us a reason for your delay and what you're requesting. Make sure you tell me that. And so when I get a letter, or when staff gets a letter, at this point, staff reviews this request. And this is sort of our current procedure right now. we report on the status of the project. We look up where it is, how close are they to meeting a milestone? What have they done? What have they not done? If you remember some of those criteria of those 2 milestones. We also analyze the project against the current development standards in place. We're trying to ask ourselves, if this project lost vesting, how would it change if it had to have the current regulations applied to it today, if they had to start over? And that little box on the green box is all of those vested documents that we're thinking about as we look at what those changes are. Because that's what we're asking the question we're asking is, would you essentially get the same plan if they had to go through the whole process over again? Or are you going to get something different because of different changes we've made to our documents over the years? What we don't provide today is a recommendation, because that is a very vague status of best interest of the community. That's very hard to judge. But what does happen with the vesting extension is that it is a public hearing, so public comment can be heard and that can be considered. And it is a public hearing, so you have discussions. The group considering the extension can have a discussion amongst yourselves as you consider that request. Okay, so before we talk about what additional information you may want, I would like to show you that we are trying to be more transparent with information that we can. We are doing some internal testing right now of a vesting dashboard where anyone can look up a project to understand what rules do I need to know about this, what timelines do I need to do. We're working out the kinks right now in staff, but I did want to show you. So the idea is that you could just type in the name, and you don't even have to type in the full name. I used Orium just as an example. I typed it in, and you're going to get immediately a dashboard or a line item of a lot of different things. You're going to get the full name of the project. You're going to get the project number in our electronic database, in our electronic plans review system, and that is actually a hyperlink. So you'll be able to go to those plans themselves and look at them. Under ordinance, that is the ordinance that's vested under, so you'll know what zoning ordinance I'm looking at this project against, and that's hyperlinked. So you can go right to a rule if you need to understand, whatever. What are the fence requirements for this project? And then the resolution is a resolution that the body approved the original plan under. We're going to show you the 2 milestones and the dates associated with those milestones. And if a vesting extension was granted, we're going to update that and show you that it was extended. The green gets lit up if they've met that milestone. And then lastly, we'll show you whether it's a 10 or 15-year total project period and the timeline of that 15th year. So hopefully that'll get available to the public early next year if all goes well. Okay, well, with all that, I hope that gives you a little bit better baseline of vesting and extensions. So now's the time that we'd like to hear from you all. When you're considering these vesting extensions, what other information do you wish you had? Or what would you like us to report on as you consider these? Some of them, we've put a couple on this slide just to kind of get your wheels turning, but we're really open for the discussion from you. So I'm going to turn it over now, unless you have anything
Sure.
else.
Vice
Okay.
Mayor?
For me, I don't know that I want a whole lot more from staff. First of all, I thought the list of vesting that you provided was fantastic. Now you're telling me you get a dashboard too. That's pretty awesome. I'll take both of those things. Because I think for me, we came on the board right after COVID. I felt like we were getting, maybe that was a normal volume, but it felt like every meeting we were doing like 10 vesting. And I think for me, I defined in the best interest of the community at that time, the broader community, people spending money and doing things in our community. So I felt like that was the bar. Let's help people get through this COVID phase. Let's get through all this vesting. So I think we did a bunch of them. I think we're past that. We should be at this point. And so now I think it's come down to now for me, it's more about, is this housing stock that we really need? Is this actually solving a problem in our community? Or is this a unique placemaking opportunity? But I don't think that's necessarily the staff bringing that. I think that's just me having a different criteria than I had in the first few years post-COVID. I do think it's always going to be contextual. Is the process been elongated? Are there bigger concerns that have come up? Something else has come behind that's changed traffic or a demand on infrastructure. I think we're always going to have to just kind of hear that out from the applicant. But for the most part, I think it's less about what I need personally from you. It's more about me just having a different criteria for how I'm evaluating those. And I would say this for me, I don't think it's an automatic anymore. I think there for a while it was an automatic to extend those. I don't know that I would consider it an automatic anymore.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, Mayor Moore. Number one, great presentation. Really liked it. This told me a lot. I'm looking at the last slide, 9, second bullet point. And the thing that pops out to me is the new considerations that need to be made with respect to utilities and traffic. The growth, the infrastructure for me is big. So when I'm thinking about providing some or extending the vesting, I want to know if there are new traffic impacts from other developments that have been completed or other things that we need to consider. I was looking at the big list and I see dates that take us out into the mid-30s and further out than that, and it gives me a lot more caution and just check marking and giving somebody extended vesting just because they're behind. So yes, any additional information that you could provide is not only their reasons but the impacts of what their development could be doing in the future would be good.
Okay. So can I clarify? So
Sure.
do I hear you asking that you want to know what has since been approved around this development?
That would be of benefit as well, yeah.
Okay.
I think I would add to yours, if I might, is,
Please.
we'll have a certain sewer capacity reserved for that particular project. And I think we need to seriously be looking at, can we fulfill that sewer capacity?
Yes. I would agree 100%.
No, good. I have a little different question I just want you to think about is the idea, and we're starting to see this, where it's a second vesting request, or there's going to be a third one. Is there a different standard, or is there something else you want us to pull out of that helps you look differently after, the first time, maybe a little different than subsequent ones? Is there a different way you want to look at that, or a different bar you want to establish for that greater good of the community kind of concept? We don't necessarily have one, but it occurs to, I think, us as we think about it, is it might be different if you're coming back a third time and you haven't really moved forward. How do we approach that? So,
Alderman Baggett, go ahead.
Well, we've got a good crowd in the room tonight to listen to this. Got some development community in the room for the impact fees. I tell you, if we build an environment though in this city that those that want to invest in our community are fearful that 2 years later there might be another elected board or other folks or that their investment might be in jeopardy, and we do not provide consistency and clarity in even this vesting schedule, then we might as well just not even start collecting it, change these impact fees, because then no one's going to do anything if we can't provide certainty. I mean, in all honesty, why would you come and risk millions and millions of dollars here if in 2 years, if we don't think it's in the best interest of the community and we don't extend the vesting? So, right, 2 years, or what's the first? The first vesting's 3 years. I'm sorry.
3 or 2.
I said 2. And what we're doing is implementing the state law.
Understood.
And what we're seeking from you is we have a way we've approached it. We want to have that consistent standard.
That's right. And
So that's what we want to be clear on. That's the whole purpose of this discussion, is to provide a good, solid, consistent policy framework for us to implement that. So
and my comments.
what your point is I think exactly what we're
is what you're trying to
get
do.
at. Exactly. Yes.
I think though, but I also would say that in that second milestone, I mean, I just think we need to be very upfront and clear with, and our vision would be Envision Franklin, in my opinion, is something I would really like to look at is that approved plan? If we're on year six, like how far apart from Envision Franklin as it is today is it? Look
Yeah,
at
so that's really that first bullet.
It's
Yeah.
that first bullet point.
Yeah.
And I think we do try to ask that question. If this project came in today, how would it measure up to Envision Franklin or whatever existing standards are today? Is there something you'd look at a little bit differently that you want to at
But I think
least
most of the time-
understand or have a discussion on?
Most of the time, it is that there are no major differences.
Typically not, yes.
I don't know of really one that I can recall where it has been that there was one major. What was that one?
It was the Wood Duck Court
Oh,
PUD
yeah.
subdivision, and the architecture would have changed significantly. We had changed our ordinance between when it was approved and when they were asking for vesting. So we reported on that.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
said the plan, like the site itself wouldn't change, but the architecture would have to if it lost vesting and came back at the start.
I just think we needed clarity. I think we need to provide guidance and give the development community really explicit clarity on what those expectations are, so that we don't deter further investment with kind of this nebulous best interest of the community standard we've been handed from the state. We need to kind of define that and have that. Maybe that can be updated every couple of years as new board members come on. But I mean,
I suggest we define it rather than the state defining it, because that's part of the problem we've gotten into
Correct.
already with
Thank you.
investing.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a question. It's on slide 3. When you go back to your vesting timeline, and you had talked about how you're going through and you're site checking and driving by things, is there not an automated process to this right now?
No,
There is not.
no. Now, it's gotten easier.
Okay.
As all of staff in the development services lane looks at vesting, we've tried to help each other in a lot of different ways. So there's an internal dashboard that I have access to stormwater inspections. If they're doing active stormwater inspections, they've gotten a site plan, they've pulled the necessary permits, and they're starting site prep. So it's a very quick look. If it's got one, they're good. The commencing construction milestone, we've determined that if they've had a foundation inspection, they're building and they think they're at least coming out of the ground. They don't necessarily have to pass it, but if they've called for an inspection, that's a clear indication to me that they're pretty close or they have met that second milestone. So it's a lot easier. I don't have to just drive around the city. I can sit at my desk and do this in 15 minutes.
So part of the reason why I asked this is I think it sounds like you're doing a great job. All right. I mean, like you said, great introduction, great job. Man, thumbs up. Again, what happens if you're out on LOA? What happens if the what ifs, and it goes back to what Alderman Baggett was just talking about, we need to be as transparent and upfront providing the communication. So if there's any way to automate any of these processes, and I would even reckon to say that certified mail to ensure that it is hitting and that they're receiving it, because I had red flags pop up to me when you got to that 60-day, or that, as Alderman Barnhill asked, you got to that point, and let's just say I didn't open mail, I've been out on vacation, it puts all these guys over the barrel. Guys gender neutral, of course, but you see what I'm saying. So the automation of this, I think, is imperative.
I agree. And we're working on that. I think that's been our goal, especially with the vesting dashboard, is how do I not even have to touch this thing and it just does it.
You'll get there.
I hope so. We got some really smart IT folks, so they've done a great job. I'll be candid. The hard part with reaching out to the owners of the development is a lot of times it's a property owner who has since sold the property since it got vesting. The applicant at the time is not necessarily involved in the project now. The developer may have even sold it to a different developer. So I agree. I want to get that information out there as much as possible so everyone's aware. It is a challenge on how to find the right people and have them actually open that letter. So
How often do they
certified
come
letter is a
find?
great suggestion. I'd love to know. You mean
I've
Do
got
they
all
find
the
a
Blanton.
ways.
Oh, that's fine. I just wanted to piggyback off what Patrick said, and I think, and Matt, when you all were elected, it did seem like we were just getting hit through this pipeline of multifamily. But I think for somebody who's been in this community, what seems like my entire life, we have been spared so much of what happens across the nation. If you think about 2008, when, you know, everybody else is bottom and we survived, bottom fell out. Let me finish that sentence. But I think having come out of COVID, and we've got a lot of people that were making plans that when life got halted for all of us. So I think we're in a really unique situation right now where everybody's kind of playing catch up. And we like to long range plan. And I think I'm very proud of how we do that with all the different transportation, Envision Franklin, and all those things. And I think we need to extend that same courtesy to the people who develop in our community for them to be able to plan out. And I think this is a part of that equation. I think when you talk about things like Envision Franklin changing and maybe the requirement when it happens versus how they got approved, to me, that continues to build variation in our product and what we offer in our community. Because we don't want everything to look cookie cutter and everybody have the same standards of design or requirement. That's what makes the community, to me, diverse. So I think all of us are doing our best to kind of deal with the hand we've been dealt. And I think we've seen in the last several months that we're hitting uncharted waters where we're both bouncing our head up against the wall trying to get what's best for what we think the citizens need and we need to hit fiscally, but also these people that have had these pro formas in place, that it changes everything. And we all know if we look down that runway to, I love Greg says that, the loser in the end is our homeowners, because then we're not able to ever address the affordable housing piece that seems to always be in our number 1 and 2 problem. So I
Okay.
love the dynamic where we've tried to work together to find solutions, and I'd love to see that continue.
My timeline is you got 2 more minutes. Alderman Barnhill. No, you can't have all of it. I got to give a little bit of it to Berger. Alderman Berger.
The developer also has to take some ownership of this, because there's 100 things that he needs to do to make a project come about. This is one of them, and he needs to be aware of it. To come in here 3 months before his investing period runs out and say, you know, I just couldn't get my money together, or I couldn't get this together, or I couldn't get something else together, is not a legitimate excuse. COVID may very well be a legitimate excuse. 2008 collapse might be a legitimate excuse. But just any excuse because they have not planned properly to get to the position that they need to be on there is not a reason to extend the vesting.
Alderman Berger, you got 1 minute.
Okay, every now and then that's probably very true. I agree, Clyde, that could be true. Maybe the planning went awry. But if you look, COVID, interest rates, loss of tenants, economy, downturns, financial markets, sometimes they get caught in between all this stuff. This is not under their control a lot of times. And so they're the big risk takers. They're putting their livelihoods on the line every time they do this to help build our homes and build our commercial spaces and everything. So, I don't know. I just look at this and we would really need, I didn't think of Eastworks. I was expecting Eastworks to be in the ground by now, but there's a lot of issues. You know, look at what happened with Office and look at all these different things that play into. You're right, absolutely right. All these things have to be considered.
Go ahead and
and
wind up,
very-
Alderman Berger.
Very rarely
We're
do
not
we
gonna be here till
have,
midnight.
very rarely do we have developers who are putting their livelihoods on the line slacking off. They may be, but rarely.
Item 8, ordinance 2023-41 to amend Chapter 4 of Title 16 of the Franklin Municipal Code concerning road impact fees.
So this is an item that's on both agendas tonight. You had deferred the second reading and public hearing related to road impact fees to the voting session tonight. We had a discussion 2 weeks ago at work session, some options or recommendations from the development community were shared with you. What our staff worked on and budget performance team worked on since then has been to try to give you some baseline to understand relative financial impact of phase-in options, grandfathering options, those elements to at least give you something to work on or work from. These are modeling efforts. When we tried to use a pretty precise review of what specific types of development have come through and been permitted and paid fees over the last 5 years, and just tried to use that as a baseline to project forward, to give you at least some sense of this and some assumptions made about how a grandfathering might work, et cetera, over time, to at least model it and give you a sense there. So we have tried to incorporate what was discussed 2 weeks ago, what's in the ordinance now, a couple other phase-in options that came from discussions with some of you, some other variations on the grandfathering that came from discussions with some of you, and just to put those out. And our goal tonight is to try to get some additional guidance from you about where you're interested or what you'd like to focus in on. This is helpful for us because, as we talked about last time, and a lot of it was coming at you for the first time then, we need to get a sense of where the board is, where there's consensus, or at least a majority of where you want to focus in on, so we can start to develop that further, maybe have further dialogue with development professionals or do additional analysis to help you making a decision. I'm not particularly optimistic that there's going to be a vote tonight at 7 o'clock on this, but I would love to get at least some additional guidance or get a sense of where the board is collectively on direction on this, so that we can refine that further and move this along. So Michael and Catherine have worked diligently on this over the last 2 weeks, and they're going to walk you through that in terms of a presentation, and you have a memo that goes into more detail that helps describe this as well. So Michael, Catherine, take it away.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My name is Michael Walters Young, your Chief Budget Performance Officer and member of the Development Services Advisory Commission. With me tonight is Catherine Harrelson, our Development Services Operations Analyst, and our job is to try to walk you through potential financial impacts regarding Ordinance 2023-41. At your places, you have two items. You have the PowerPoint that I am going to review, and you have the memo. These have both been changed today to add one additional scenario of grandfathering, as Eric alluded to, that has been proposed, and reflect some of the questions and comments which came up yesterday when we met with development professionals at 8:30 in the morning. It is only additive. It is on Civic Clerk, so the items which are on top, the PowerPoint and the memo, are the exact same as the ones that are at your places. And I will point out as we go what is different in the presentation tonight versus what was there when it was originally posted on Thursday or Friday. So we will do a quick overview of what we're talking about, the discussion of full implementation, phase-in options, the proposals for exemptions, or if you will, grandfathering for existing projects, and then summarize and stand for any and all questions that you may have. Let us quickly remind ourselves to go back to the beginning. Ordinance 1988-13 created the road impact fees, which we now charge for new development. They have been amended in 2011 and again in 2016, and these funds can be used for new arterial roads and collectors, which directly for the payment of debt service on bonds associated with projects, and which add capacity to the road network. For the first 25 years or so of the fund, there was only arterial fees collected. In 2016, that was amended to include collectors or collector areas, and that was divided, the city was divided into 4 quadrants. Next slide shows you what those 4 quadrants are. It was a question that was raised. It's important to kind of remember that we have 2 fees that we collect that are quadrant-based. Parkland dedication fees have 4 quadrants. Collector area road impact fees have 4 quadrants. So no, they're not quite the exact same lines. Something we may very well look at trying to address in the future to add consistency to our impact processes. Arterial collections account for about 83% of the total fees collected. Collector area quadrants account for about 17% based upon vehicle miles traveled.
So if you think about the parkland impact fee, it's a flip almost, because that goes 25% towards citywide parks, and then 75% is divided out by the quadrants for more neighborhood or localized parks. So this is sort of the inverse of that, because the arterial road network is really the backbone, those large roadways that connect us that are key in the transportation plan overall.
So, to begin evaluating the proposed increases of Ordinance 2023-41, the Office of Budget and Performance, and I'm being terribly magnanimous, Catherine, first evaluated permit by permit, project by project, the amount of money collected in road impact fees over the last 5 audited fiscal years. Remember, those of us that exist in the world of finance want to be able to tie back to something that's actual and that you can refer to. And so on screen, you can see that the actual revenues collected average for those 5 years from road impact fees, a total of $8.35 million per year. There are high years, there are low years, but that's why you take at least a 5-year average. After assessing what was collected, we then evaluated the amount of money that would have been collected had the full implementation of the proposed fees under Ordinance 2023-41 been implemented over the same time frame. This is also shown on your next slide. That average comes to roughly $21.25 million for that 5-year time span, or a difference of $12 to $13 million annually. To try to forecast further, we do not, as a general rule within the financial apparatus of this community, ever try to be speculative about what development is going to come in and what revenues we're going to collect. So we have assumed in all of the modeling that you're about to see that the amount of collections and thus the development activity for the past 5 audited years is what we would have in the future. We have no idea when that next Great Recession is going to hit, when COVID's going to hit, when vesting rights may be asked to be extended. And so therefore we are basing it on what was in order to try to determine what could be. Obviously, the math shows 21 minus 8, $12 to $13 million is a large amount of change. So the first request that was made of us was to consider phase-in options of this fee. The ordinance provides a 2-year and a 3-year phase-in, but after further conversations with our development partners, as well as with you, we have about to show a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, and a 5-year phase-in of those options. On the screen and in your memos, figure 3 shows what those would look like, and the far column is the amount of unrealized revenue, our terminology, that is the difference between fully implementing the fees or phasing them in. You can see there is a line under each category, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, 5-year, that shows you what percentage increment of the fee would be implemented. So if you take 2 years, half the fee would be implemented in year 1, 100% in year 2, onward. Take 4 years, 25% in year 1, 50% in year 2, 75% in year 3, 100 years 4 and 5.
Just to be clear, we're not proposing, and the ordinance has not proposed a full implementation in year 1. Correct. This is just to give you sort of a relative comparison to a full implementation scenario, just so you can compare options to one another.
And the order of magnitude that results in each phase. Summary of that slide on figure 3 is that the unrealized revenue ranges between a low of $6.4 million if you take 2 years to phase it in, and $25.8 million if you take 5 years to phase that in. An alternative phase-in was also asked staff, and so that is figure 4. That would be, you would do 25% of the fee in year 1, 50% of the fee in year 2, and then 100% in years 3, 4, and 5.
Another way to say that is 25% bump in year one, 25%, additional 25% bump in year two, and then the final 50% all in a third year. So it's not doing it a third, it's doing it halfway for 2 years and then the final half in the final third year.
The amount of unrealized revenue in that scenario would be $16.1 million for the 5-year time frame. Like I said, we've had a lot of meetings over the last 6 weeks on this topic. And in several of our meetings with the development community, the discussion or request to consider grandfathering or exemptions for existing projects has come up. The crux of the proposal submitted by the development community is that for entitled projects which are on the books, single-phase developments would have 5 years to complete their projects under existing fees, and multi-phase projects would have up to 15 years. This modeling includes a 5-year escalator in each of those scenarios to account for indexing and inflationary pressures. In fact, all of these remaining scenarios, 1, 2, and 3, with the exemptions for existing projects, include some type of escalator, whether it be 5% or whether it be 10%. Two alternative versions of that would be, instead of a 5-year for single phase and 15-year for multi-phase, that it's 10 years total, regardless of the phase. And that scenario 2 is a 10% escalator. Scenario 3 is a 5% escalator. For all of these scenarios, 5, 6, and now 7, we maintained a comparison to the fees collected with a full implementation in order to provide a basis of reference. Again, we know that we're not recommending that, and depending upon the phase-in that you seem to agree to or be interested in, we can refine this analysis to give you a better idea of what that difference would be. The other added wrinkle to these 3 scenarios is that it makes logical sense that as projects come to fruition, that the amount of grandfathered projects would naturally go down, and the amount of new projects, which would not be eligible and would be susceptible to or eligible and pay under the higher fee, would go up. So in each of these scenarios, we started with 100% grandfathered projects in years 1 and 2, and then began their decline. So 90%, 80%, 70% for a 10-year, and then a slightly more extended phase out in the 15-year scenario. Again, it's an estimate, but we had to account for the fact that you would be collecting more money with newer projects from the beginning when they would come online, but still accounting for the fact that there's a lot of projects which are in, and thus their amount of money would start at the maximum and then would start to phase out as they're built. That is detailed in scenarios 5, 6, and 7 of your memo on pages 4, 5, and 6. Those slides are not going to appear on the screen because those are very complicated spreadsheets and would simply be too small to see. But the impacts are summarized on screen. Scenario 1 presents the impact of difference between full implementation and collections and a phased grandfathered approach over 15 years. And that difference is $101.5 million of unrealized revenue. Now, apples to apples, the other scenarios are 5 years. So through 5 years, it would be a cumulative $60.1 million in unrealized revenue if you compare the full implementation to the scenario proposed under grandfathering in scenario 1, figure 5. In scenario 2, 10-year implementation with a 10% escalator, that amount over 10 years is $66.7 million, or over 5 years is $53.9 million. And in scenario 3, that amount is $68.9 million over the 10 years, or $55.7 million over 5 years. And again, if you think about that really kind of demonstrates the fact that there's only a gap, let's say in figure 7 or scenario 3 of $13 million in the last 5 years. And that's because the amount of grandfathered projects have been built. So they account for less of the revenues that would be coming in. The assumption would be that the new projects would pay the full fee, and thus the amount of unrealized revenue is less the further out you go. In summary, and yes, we're happy to stand for questions. Phasing in between 2 and 5 years would result in unrealized revenue of between $6.4 and $25.8 million over a 5-year period, depending upon if you choose 2, 3, 4, or 5. Exemptions or grandfathering for projects could result in unrealized revenue over 10 to 15 years of between $66.7 and $101.5 million, depending upon the length of the grandfathering, the type of the escalator. That's $53 million to $60 million over 5 years in each of those scenarios. I realize that this is rough and that this is an estimate generally of a hypothetical.
And fast.
And expedient.
Expedient then.
This is designed to help give you additional information that you have been asking for. We are happy to refine it further and happy to provide you with anything else that you need to make the best decision for the community.
I'm going to start on this end, go down that way, and ask everybody to give staff input so that they can create what we need to create this final version of the ordinance.
One other added comment before you do that, if I can. There seems to be a general acceptance, both in dialogue with the board and I think in our conversations with the development community, that an indexing going forward is a wise companion to whatever we do. So that is kind of assumed throughout this, that we would be implementing an indexing going forward that ties to a standard acceptable sort of inflationary index. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So yes, one of the things we've talked about in implementing this, and we did it with water and sewer when we did the updates there, is to include an indexing of these rates going forward. So we would tie to a standard inflationary index and use it and implement it every year so that there is a consistent growth that ties to inflation in these rates, so that we don't lose that component, and it probably lessens the shock in any future adjustments to the fee structure, at least somewhat. So that seems to be generally accepted in all the dialogue we've had, but I just wanted to mention that is going to be something we would include, whatever scenario you direct us to, or scenarios you direct us to develop further. So, thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Barnhill.
There's a lot of proposals here, and I understand where you're coming from, and I understand the meetings that you've had concerning this. There are some that I am concerned about, and maybe I'm not ready to go to the ones that I am not concerned about so much. But the 15-year and all of that, I am truly concerned about that, because I don't think that that's going to generate the revenue that we're going to need to have to do what is on our CIP budgets right now. We just got through with $158 million, and that was not even to include the projects that's already been somewhat in the pipeline to be built, maintained, or whatever. Well, we wouldn't maintain it off of this. So when I look at this right here, I'm going to try to go through and eliminate rather than pick out what I can agree to. The 2 year, the 3 year, some of that may be a little bit aggressive as far as the implementation, but I'm gonna be looking back at those 2 or 3 proposals, 3, 4, 5, whatever they are on there, and see just exactly what the impact is on that. But when we start having 19, 20, $25 million less collected based upon the fact that we've gone out and put a 5-year plan in, and then we put another little plan to the plan, I have a concern for that.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, thank you for all of the meetings that all of you have had internally, and thank you for meeting with everybody who may be sitting in the room or not here tonight. It has been hours, if not days and weeks of meetings, and we appreciate you doing that. It is an investment into Franklin's future. Recognizing time, I'll try to just be somewhat brief. I came out of the gate with great concern about our development community and trying to implement this over 2 to 3 years. I think I may have been one of the first to say I think 5 years was more palatable, and that's what y'all have listed here on figure number 3. It does concern me, as similar to what Alderman Barnhill just said, when I see the unrealized revenue of $25.8 million on that 5-year. It does give me concern, because here we are trying to do these infrastructure projects either independently or in partnership with the state. So that 5-year is throwing some. It's given me a little bit of angst right now, but I still think that in order not to completely stop the engine, not to necessarily even slow it down too much, I still think 5-year option is where I am today. Now, regarding the grandfathering, I'm a little concerned based on all of the options that were presented by the development community that y'all were able to meet with, that it went out 15 years. I think that's too much. I think 10 years may have been palatable if we're looking at, if we went with the 5-year approach for the phase-in and then the grandfathering at 10, I wouldn't mind seeing a grandfathering at 5, though. I just think that we're in a different environment than we were 6 months ago, based on what's taking place with TDOT and all of those projects. So that's the ask that I have right now is bring me something regarding grandfathering that's at 5 years, and I think that's what I need to do right now. So I appreciate the time, but
One quick clarification. If we did a 5-year scenario, would it have we've got the 5% or 10% escalator and some of those others, would you want to see some form of an escalation with
yes,
that? Okay.
Same scenario that
Same
you have
idea.
right here.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Alderman Caesar.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a big issue for a lot of people, constituents and people who are invested in our community and developing it. And I appreciate the time that staff's put into putting together some concepts. And my hope was that we'd get simpler, but it seems we've gotten more complex. I was proud that the development community and staff came together and made, in all of the meetings that I've attended, I think a good effort at finding homeostasis in a project or a proposal that worked for city and that worked for the development community. I do think that some of these assumptions may have, with all due respect, Michael, some flaws, because they're only looking at one side of the equation, assuming that these developments continue given the new fee structure. And I think that's one of my concerns. The development community may choose and can choose to take some of these projects to other areas. And we so far have been quite fortunate in the city of Franklin to be quite an attractive place for people to build properties. I hope that continues. I hope we continue to be the belle of the development community's ball. And having said that, I also, as a taxpayer and as a resident, I don't want to see us subsidizing development projects. I don't like the idea of a 2-year project. I think the 2-year with a 50%, 100%, I think that's too quick. I don't think that shows proper appreciation from folks who are sitting in this room and who are sitting at home that have helped build this community to be the great city of Franklin that it is today. I don't think 3 years does it. I'm curious about the 4 and 5, but my preference would be for us to set a new rate and to set it very quickly and to set it very clearly so that the people who are sitting on the other side of this room know what it's going to cost them to build a property in Franklin in 2024, in 2025, in 26 and beyond. Much like the two who have already spoken, I have some reservation about going out for 15 years on a grandfathering, and maybe a point of clarification on what what's been presented tonight, there was the escalator program, 50%, 33%, and there was the grandfathering and introducing the fee in January 25, correct? There was no grandfathering introduced into the escalator program,
The phase in?
the phase-in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You could blend it.
But as it
Right
was
now, we're
presented,
trying
there
to,
was no blend.
yeah, right now, we're trying to assess them each so that you can see that, and we want guidance from you about what you'd like us to assess further. So we're trying to give you something to understand each on its own, and then if you want to try to see how we might put those together, we can
could have
try to
probably
take that
7
to
or
a
8
next
more
step.
slides
Yeah.
to explain that. But no, I think in all,
We can explain,
what
yeah,
you're looking
expand.
for me is, I like the idea of the people who have projects that are going to come out of the ground, giving them an opportunity to bring those projects out of the ground at the fees that they did their pro formas with. I like the idea of limiting that, not putting it out to 15, 20, 25 years, but limiting it. I think 10 years probably feels appropriately long. I think 15 is too long. And I think doing something January 2025 is what I want to see out of the city. Thank you.
Alderman Peterson.
Well, two things to start with. I was not able to attend the Monday meeting. I think it's the only one I'd missed, and we were just out of town. But the other thing is, I'm a numbers person, and I'm just looking at all this thinking, I've really got to think about it a lot and, look at it much more carefully than I've been able to do at this point. The only comment that I would make is I think there should be some grandfathering. But as I say, I don't want to make any comments about until I can look at
Alderman
it more carefully.
I'd be curious what the impact is from all these developments on our city. And if they don't happen and don't exist, what kind of revenues don't we even get in sales tax and revenues in our city? I mean, there's a take and give there that I think is really important. I've not seen that at all, but Greg, you said a lot of good things there, and I agree with. But I'm concerned we may not. Some of these may not go forward. That bothers me. And if they don't continue the development, so that's why I'm definitely 100% for grandfathering in. Anybody that's entitled, site plans and entitlement, they need to go forward, and they don't need to be over there sitting worried with their bankers and their investors and the people they've signed to come into their spaces that they will lose. We can't afford to let them, as a city, we can't afford to let them lose that. Because they lose, we lose. And so that is very concerning to me. The impact fees, setting a new rate, doing it more quickly, and the grandfathering in, I'm more comfortable anywhere between 5 and 10 years. Definitely not 15, more like 5 to 8 possibly. And setting something up that we can actually get to in the first of the year and to vote on, to implement. But it has to be phased in, and I think these scenarios are good, but I don't want to go the 15 years, definitely not that. The only other thing I wanted to say on that was that, I'm concerned about these impact fees. I know we have certain impact fees that you have to use in the quadrant, but all our impact fees can be used elsewhere, not necessarily in the quadrant where they're.
For collectors, they
For
need to be
collectors.
used in the quadrant.
Yes,
The
for
arterials are for roads that are designated in the arterial network.
Yeah, true.
Which is all over the city.
Yeah, but still, we have some that could be used elsewhere, and so I'm just a little concerned about that. I still think the impact of a development that money needs to stay where it's impacting versus like east of 65 versus Mac Hatcher by West Haven. They're not impacting each other, so That's one of my concerns.
Alden?
Well, the only funds really that would impact Mac Hatcher to West Haven would be right now TDOT funds
No, I'm not talking.
as of today.
I'm not talking about that. This is a different example.
Oh, okay.
Just east versus west. North versus
No,
south.
TDOT funds are the,
Sorry,
that's
I
who builds
didn't want to
Mac
confuse
Hatcher.
you.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Nothing to do with Mac Hatcher.
But, that's a personal interest to me,
I know.
that other bridge. I like the, this is exactly what I was looking for when I said financial impact, and I think this has really helped us clarify what we're doing here, the pieces that are, and how it affects. I do think there's obviously some assumptions in here that may or may not transpire as they are modeled, and that could lead to some of these cumulative differences to be different, depending on when a project, actually does hit. Some of them, I'm looking at the list here, some of them of size, depending on what year they hit, it could throw the averages, but I think this generally gives us a good example. So I'm like Alderman Barnhill, I think I'll just eliminate some, that the 15-year 5% is gonna be tough to swallow. I don't think it's good, honestly, I just think that's too much. I think we can do it, differently. I like the idea of this 10 for 10, the 10%, 10 years, and thinking about that 10% escalator, we're running about 4%. Well, now that things have settled down inflation-wise, just in general. if you think about it, when was the last time we increased our impact fees for roads? 17, 16?
17, we added the collectors.
Well, it's 28% cumulative inflation since 2017. I did that math before I came, but the cost of those roads, so we need to see some escalating on the existing, but also grandfathering in and not applying the full. So the 10% I think makes a little more sense, palatable, plannable, and then I think I go back to the full implementation. Now this is going to hurt the 66 of this figure 6. This is going to hurt the net. So I want to see some of this, but also don't think it's in the best interest of the community to just dump the new fee on all new development. Because we want the current development community to develop what they've got approved, but we want them to come back and build quality projects, especially a lot of the local ones that are in here. They've done exceptional work and helped build this community. So I think phasing in the new fee so it's kind of a blend of figure 3 and then the figure 6, which would give us, and I think you would probably do like a 3 to 5 year, 3 or 4 year kind of implementation of the new fee on this 10 for 10. So then I want to see what those numbers look like. And again, it may be 2 or 3. I don't know. Maybe it's 2 year, 2 to 4 years, 2 to 5 years. I don't know. Those options and implemented over this 10 for 10. And let's see what that financial impact looks like. I still think that's a pig. I think some of the development community might have said that's a pig, but no, I think I just want us to get some of these more refined options out there and have a discussion with them and see, is this palatable? Is this how do you all feel about this? How do you think this is going to impact? And at the end of the day, we could just phase the whole thing out over 10 years, the new one out. At the end of the day, and do no grandfathering, but no one seems to want to do that. I don't know that that's fair. But actually, I kind of would probably want to see that phase the new one out over 10 years. I don't know. We may end up being
So with no grandfathering, and just do a 10-year for everybody.
10-year phase.
Okay.
I don't know what the math looks like on that, but if it's close, that's going to be super simple to administer, and doesn't affect the market. The new market of new developments. All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Probably not making many friends today, but that's all right. I came in ready to vote, and I feel like, my concern always has been, we just keep kicking this down. That's even less predictability for the development community. It's even bigger hole for us. So it's a tough decision, but I'm prepared to do it if we need to here. Where I was landing, if I voted today, was for a 3-year rollout. I think that seems fair. I think that's an appropriate amount of time without putting us too far in the hole. And I probably would have went with just a 5-year on the grandfathering. There were 2 things that we wanted. We wanted to create predictability. It's a shame we haven't been doing this for the last 7 years, because we wouldn't even be having this conversation probably. Everybody be paying where we need to be paying. And so I don't think I've not heard anybody challenge that the rates are wrong or that the fees are wrong. What I've heard is, wait, that's going to hit us when we've already got projects in play. And so I think the grandfathering is important. But I think to take it out 15 years, even 10 years, just seems like for 7 years, the community's benefited from not increasing road impact fees. But at some point, we gotta get them where they need to be. And everything else has gone up too. So, Michael, the only question I had though is, as I look at the 5-year, so 3-year and a 5-year grandfathering, I can certainly think about that 10-year grandfathering, but I feel like we need to get caught up, and we need to get going and get people back onto a trending that they can be more predictable. The question I had though what I was trying to get to was, if you did a 5-year phase in on the grandfathering, what is that's left on the table from that? What's throwing me off is I don't understand. I think you tried to explain it, but I just wasn't catching it. Why is the new projects in the grandfathering numbers in this? Like, I don't understand how that tells me what's left on the table by grandfathering existing projects.
So because everything is compared to full implementation, what we tried to do was account for the total revenues collected in each year. And that delta is it gets you the unrealized revenue figure. So if in years 1 and 2, which is consistent throughout all of the grandfathering scenarios, you have 100% grandfathered projects, AKA we're collecting fees with a slight escalator that are the existing fees, and we're not collecting any of the full implementation or the new fees. Then the next year, year 3, you would get 90% collections of existing fees and 10% at the new. And then as projects get built, the amount collected under the current fee goes down, the amount collected under the new fees goes up. That's the only way that I knew how to be realistic about, and again, a hypothetical estimate form of realism.
It is a model, yeah.
in this model, but to account for the fact that as they get built, you're going to have fewer and fewer projects that fall under the old fees.
The grandfathering.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
Alderman Blanton.
I hesitate to say, but shame on us for not getting ahead of this. I mean, and I see it across the board in all the impact fees and even our property taxes. I think we've done it to ourselves, and I think, when we talk about being the lowest tax rate in cities our size in the state and being proud of it, I'm not. I think that's become part of our problem. So, and that's my opinion. And so when you look at this, and I know it's political suicide, that's me, I just roll the dice. When you talk about phasing in, I think that even though we're trying to do our best to help the grandfathering in for the existing developments in the pipeline, there's still some that are on the fray, and there's some that are on the fringe that this would really hurt them as well. And it's all about this timing game. It's like January 1st, 2025, and we've got a developer that's in here tonight that has a specific schedule that they've got to meet, or guess what? It's like, we got to start all over again, and it may not happen, to Bev's point. So to me, I want to give as much grace as I can, but I also want to be I'm not trying to be contradictory. I think because we have put ourselves in this situation, I think we have to give a little bit of grace. But I also think that we need to the indexing moving forward is brilliant, and it's smart, and it makes it so there's no surprises. There probably will be, but by and large, there's not as much surprises. I think we need to do this across the board. I think for the grandfathering in, I still really think that we have a responsibility to stand beside the votes that were taken when they were approved and not upset the apple cart to the point where it just is upside down. I do see where 15 years might be too long. I think we have to look at which developments need that kind of time so that we almost have this, because on this, it wasn't broken out to which ones are, and I hate to use the word entitled because it can mean two different things, but this is kind of like all together as one, as opposed to breaking out the value of what would be 10 and what would be 15 if we look at the vesting, or the entitlement. And I know they're not the same. So I would tend to roll out the phasing over 5 years, and I would probably stop at 10 years, but only on the grandfathering in, but only after I've seen the model of which ones need that, because then you're really dealing with a little bit closer of real numbers. So, done.
Well, I'll bear my soul also, and thinking a little bit on what the next item that we're going to talk about is that whatever we do here as far as these impact fees for roads, we're going to be looking at some kind of similar scenario with water and sewer impact fees as we look to expand the plant. I agree with a number of you who talked about certainty, and I think that that's one thing that we definitely need to offer our development community is here's the rules, here's certainty, here's what the fees are, period, so they can do their planning. There are so many other factors that they have to consider. This is one factor probably of at least 100 that they have to consider when they're doing a project. I'm okay with phasing in the fee over about 3 years for new projects. I think that's reasonable. As far as grandfathering, I've struggled with this one quite a bit. And kind of the scenario I came up with in my mind was grandfather it over 3 years, but start at a lower rate. Maybe add 25% the first year, 25% the second year, and then the third year, 50%. So that would encourage these projects to continue to move forward. I think it's awfully important that we go ahead and set the rate. I think January is a great target, and I would encourage us to do that. I've got 3 speakers I need to call, and we've got a lot to do. So I'm going to ask Rachel Blackhurst and Ralph Canals and Glenn McGee if they'd come up, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes each.
Mr. Mayor, as they come up, let me just add, I mentioned that there's a clear consensus around indexing being in this. The other thing we've talked about that I think is something we're committed to putting in place too is this idea of having a rate schedule that's defined over multiple years, a 3 to 5 year, where we're saying, here's what your fees are going to be. And we're working towards that as well. So both the indexing and that defined schedule of fees over multiple years are kind of givens in our mind that that's going to happen. These other pieces around phase in and grandfathering is where we're looking for direction.
Rachel, please.
Hi. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Oh, better? Sorry, I have a quiet voice. And well, good evening. It's been a long time since I've spoken with all of you. Really want to thank the city again. This was an exceptional amount of math that they did, mind-boggling for me personally. But thank you for all your efforts in that area. Really pleased tonight. I know we've been really hitting the drum hard on this grandfathering issue, but as we've communicated, it is really, really crucial to certain projects that they will be able to move forward and deliver for their clients, but also for the community. So thank you for hearing us and for being willing to put forth your own options for what that looks like. I think, without talking to the whole development community yet, I think I can safely say, though, that there's flexibility on our end for what that time frame could look like for how long is necessary for grandfathering, and similarly timeframes on phase in. So appreciate you hearing us on that, and we're willing to keep having these conversations and having them as quickly as possible.
We're going to the good-looking one.
Ooh,
Ralph,
that
I
one's
think I
loaded.
had you next. I'm going to overrule Mr. McGee.
You've left the good looking one.
Thanks, Rachel. You've worked very, very hard, and we appreciate it as a community. You know, I've got so many thoughts, and I wasn't going to say anything until you called my name, Mayor. But anyway, you know, there
Gave
was a
us a
slide in
speaker
our
card.
packet we got the other day that said since the inception of the ordinance, we've raised over $115 million, but yet we've only spent $91 million. You know, it seems like to me, over that period of time, we've had a pretty incredible community that's been able to meet most of its demand. And I realize we may be paying for that, some of that now, but that's just one thought. Alderman Brown, you made a comment that no one's really fussed about what the fees are. And where I'm at right now is I stand with my investors, which are friends and family, that we paid over $1 million an acre for a piece of property in Cool Springs, and now we're staring at a $17 million increase in this. Is I'm trying to protect our asset, right? But I'll give you an example. I had an incredible client in town today, 10,000 square foot, very nice restaurant that would like to be in Cool Springs, would like to be in here for many years. Their fee today is about $20,000 per 1,000 square feet. So they're a 10,000 square foot restaurant. They do about $15 million a year. I know Ann and I have talked a lot about sales tax. That's a lot of sales tax, right? But if they go all the way to where the fee's going to go, that's going to be over $600,000 of an impact fee. It was already the highest that most of them ever see anywhere in the nation at $200,000. You get to $600,000, it's astronomical. What does that mean to me, the developer, when I build that space for them? That's $6 of rent per square foot, which is a lot of rent, right? And they don't have to choose to come to Cool Springs, right? And we may not care about that, as I've heard Vernon talk about, you know, we're a community by choice. But here's the deal. They've got to do 5 deals in 2026. They could do Austin, Waco. I mean, they don't have to come to Cool Springs. I'm trying to get them here, right? That's what we're trying to do. And so, but that's a big deal. When you really look at the dollars and cents of where this goes for a 10,000 square foot restaurant that produces an incredible amount of sales tax. You know, so that's really it. I appreciate it. I really would appreciate some type of grandfathering. My only question on grandfathering is, we've started construction last year and started we're putting infrastructure in the ground, and then sewer and water increased while we were doing that. So when does grandfathering start? I think it starts when I go to pull a permit to go vertical, not when I'm putting infrastructure in the ground, is what it seems like to me.
The way it's set right now is with the permit.
Right.
That's how it's set up right now.
Permit of grading or permit of?
Building
in that
permit.
phase going-
It's at building permit at the vertical. That's another component. We've talked about the ability to pay a certain percentage upfront and the balance as you get into final inspection, say maybe 30% upfront and 70% at final inspection. That gives you the ability to spread that cost out over the construction period. So that's very much something we are open to as well.
So it's a complicated matter. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for giving me a seat at the table for a minute. I'm going to be very brief. I appreciate all the debate and all the ideas that you've shared back and forth today. I do want to just implore on you to think really hard about the length of grandfathering, because I think it's a very important question with existing developments, because if we don't have the time to be able to develop and do what we've already financially planned to do over that period of time, we may not be able to do it at all. That's a problem. I mean, none of the numbers that you were presented would make sense if we don't do it. That's even going to be worse. I also would like to think that you would at least consider somewhere between the 3 and 5 years for the rollout, just because I think that's really the proper timing to roll it out and give us time to start planning. Many of our developments take 3 to 5 years to even from an idea and a piece of property we're considering to bring out of the ground and actually turn over a product. And I just want to just share that with you. Thanks so much.
Okay, we need to keep rolling on. We're going to go to, and we're going to try to go to item 12 tonight. We will get through item 12. So, but we will not be doing 13, 14, 15. So we're going to do clean water plant size and phasing.
So this is a continuation of our infrastructure and development timing discussion. I think you have heard me say we really want to drive towards clear board direction on the size and timing of the South Water or Clean Water plant by the end of this year. That really helps us set up where we need to go in terms of planning that infrastructure, looking at that impact on those impact fees and the water, specifically the sewer realm, and how it might also impact our long-term rate structure as well. So all of that is critical as we also look at the timing and need and the pace of development and demand on sanitary sewer treatment capacity. Sorry, a lot of talking tonight. So yeah, a lot of letters there. So
Are we going to go past 7 o'clock? Or
Yes, we will go past 7 o'clock, and so
thank you.
My deadline is no later than 7:30. I want us back in here.
all right, take it away.
Okay.
We'll walk you through what the scenarios are and get any feedback you have.
Yeah, so I'm Michelle. Brian's not here tonight, so we got Mark.
Such stated so well.
So we're gonna kind of talk through most of these slides you've already seen, and then we have some new stuff at the end. I do want to say for the vesting presentation, and then for this one, I did get you board credit for this. So this is my hook for y'all to pay attention. All right, so we're gonna kind of go through some of the presentations that we did in June, or the slides from the presentations we did in June, and then we have just some other kind of factors, and then we'll talk about the kind of wrapping it all up with some discussion at the end. So stepping back once again to kind of the integrated water resources plan that we did in 2011. I know that some of y'all weren't here during that time, but really the recommendations from that report was that we would upgrade our existing facility on Claude Yates to 16 MGD, as well as building a new facility on the south part of town. So that is the way that the water department has been operating as far as approving availabilities and keeping track of those with conveyance and with treatment availabilities that we do. So I wanted to kind of remind you that that's what we've been doing as we kind of look forward to making future decisions. We acquired the southeast site. So before I was here, for kind of this specific purpose, it was identified that this would be a really logical place that we knew would be a lot of growth happening. And then we talked about in previous slides about our population projections. We had CDM update these. Actually it was last year, I think, with kind of some of our most recent projections. And it really is showing, obviously it kind of calibrated what they had projected for us back in 2011, but really sets the trend for kind of where we're going and the fact that we do need another additional capacity on the south part of town. So the IWRP used 2.9% for growth. This is one of the big kind of assumptions. We used 3% just to kind of keep it as an even number, and that's pretty much what we've seen. It's a pretty conservative number. So this was also planning, when we had the presentation in June, planning showed this slide. This is where they've seen a lot of the growth. So those blue parcels, or the orange and the blue parcels. So you can see kind of it's in that southern part of town. But there's also, some stuff happening in Cool Springs. And so really this is, the intent is to kind of show that this is a base, this is not basin, this is an entire citywide, capacity need that we have. Adding more flow to Claude Yates, but then also pursing some of that flow off to the south plant to where we can have availability and kind of play that matching game. So we had done, so Brian had kind of looked at our MORs and did some data crunching and kind of, this is the number that we presented last time. So in kind of our past history, the past 10 years, we're using about 4 million gallons every 10 years of capacity. So if you continue that trend, based off of what we've seen, so based off of that, those are kind of the planning periods that we've looked at, right? So that's the 2034, new facility, and then the 2044 planning period that we'll talk about. So if you have any questions, please, I know I'm flying through this.
You're doing a great job.
Okay. So we really narrowed it down to kind of 3 options that we wanted to present to you tonight. We looked at a whole host of options, but I think these 3 are really the main talking points right here. So we have the IWRP recommended this facility going to an 8 MGD facility. Obviously, 14 years ago in those numbers, that cost was drastically different. a 6 MGD, we talked about how we're using 4 million gallons of capacity every 10 years. So a 6 would get us a little bit beyond that planning period of 10 years. And then a 4 MGD is obviously just the bare minimum of what we need right now, right? So if that's what we need right now, then that doesn't give us much room for expansions, as we talked about the vesting properties and those extensions. In any of those options, we are looking at only recommending up to a 2 million gallons of advanced treatment. So we had a mix match of up to 4 million gallons, but I think it would really be wise for us to stay at 2 right now. If we go up to 4 and then anything more than that, it requires our water plant to be expanded, and it's just I don't think that's a decision we need to make at this kind of planning juncture right now.
And some of that water though going to be into the Harpeth?
Yes. Yeah.
But you would
so-
have to expand the clean
we-
water facility to release the 2 million.
Yeah, so
Does
if
that
we
make
did,
sense?
right, the advanced treatment would be up to 2. So that would be up to 2 that we would be sending to the reservoir for
Oh,
augmentation.
and then the other 2
And
would
then the
just
rest of
could
it would
go
go in the
into-
Harpeth. Yeah. So then we have the varying amounts from that, 2, 4, and 6. So I have the cost here, and those are big numbers, but also keep in fact that those have been escalated to 2034 numbers, right? That's why they are large. They have a large number for inflation in there. And then I also have this last column is the capacity. So based off of today's rates of this 3% growth, that's the planning capacity that we will have until, right? So that's when another facility would need to be online. If you have the 4 MGD, right, that's 2039. That's that 5 years, because that's what the 4 MGD is. We talked about in the previous slide. Does that make sense? Okay. So I wanted to show this. Hazen, our consultant, kind of pulled this together for us. This is just a preliminary layout, knowing all the boxes and circles that we would need to have for each of these processes. So you can see we have the 3 phases at 6 MGD per phase. So we have a 6 to 12 and then an 18 that we could put on that site. Potentially, if 6 MGD is what is what is recommended to be moved forward upon. This is the latest plan from the park project that's bidding right now. So it's you can see it's pretty packed. But what we've done is we have shaped some things to where we've got room for expansion. So there's a lot of other regulations that may be coming out, and this would take care of all of that with what we need to have.
Where would I don't really see, where would the expansion space be?
Well, so like the green train, the green boxes is 6 MGD, and then the orange boxes would be 12.
So
and
the
then
3
the
phases
boxes.
that are defined are the expansion
Yeah.
components.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we've also talked about a timeline, right? That kind of 10 years of capacity that we would need. And so I pulled together this, and I kind of tried to break it down a little bit, because when we think about probably 2 to 3 years for design, and then a maximum of probably 5 years for construction, that puts us really close to that 2034 timeframe of being online, right? So we looked at that with the 3 phases, and then we kind of backed that out to where we would need to be today. And so I have, if you have that first phase, if it was online by 2034, we would have 10 years of capacity, right? That 6 MGD would be 10 years of capacity. But in that time, we would have, you can see that those blank boxes right there between 2035 and 2036. And then we got to start planning again for another plan and design. And then we have construction on top of that. So it's a pretty, if growth continues the way it is, it's a pretty aggressive schedule to kind of continue providing the capacity that we would need.
But we would also have the opportunity to not continue to phase 2.
Right.
If growth is not
Correct.
projecting.
Yeah.
So it kind of does, although it is aggressive, it does also give us a window.
It gives us that off ramp.
Yeah, you're always going to have a cycle where you look at what's that pace look like, what are the community needs. Yeah, you could defer it further out, but this gives you probably the 3-6 MGD phases probably gives you the most capacity and the most flexibility over time to adapt to it. Because you do have 3 phases, they're consistent in terms of size. So I think that really does give you something to work from.
But you can't just choose the first, you can't choose a, hold on, going back to it. We couldn't do a first phase of 4 MGD and make the schedule work.
You could, but your planning for your next phase would be almost over. You need to push that further, closer up. You'd have even more overlap in planning because it just doesn't buy you that much capacity and time.
So, which is a great, it's a great segue into this slide. So this is one that you've seen before. So, really, with the rate that we have grown so far with the availabilities that have been approved and with the vested properties, 4 MGD is what is needed right now based off of those properties. So that is not bringing anything else on into the system, right? So at a minimum, we have to build a 4 MGD facility. But if you would like some additional planning room to not have to back keep going, then that would be where the 6 or an 8 MGD facility comes into play. So this is the slide where we have kind of 2 paths, right? We have this one path of we continue as planned, we build that minimum of 4 MGD facility, and then we evaluate if it's if we need any additional capacity. The other path is that we stop growing, we don't grow anymore, we still have to build a 4 MGD facility based off of what's already been approved. And then, obviously the current impact fees, the water and sewer impact fees don't cover a new facility, so those would have to be reevaluated. And then we would have a finite capacity that would be left, that would have to be considered how to be divvied out.
I just really want to dig into those numbers because the integrated water plan had us building how big in 2040? 12?
In 8.
8. I mean, how is it that today, what was the addition we did at the current existing
4.
plant? 4.
You went from 12 to 16.
How long, it is just a little bit, how did we get to where we have to build a 4 to accommodate everything that's been approved today? It just doesn't, it just feels like that's a bit backwards. That we would approve without capacity.
You always have some timing and phase in that it takes to do anything. And so this is what you've built now is consistent with the growth pattern you've seen over the last 30 plus years.
Understood. But if everybody came in and said, pulled a permit tomorrow, that was on our approved, not yet built, we'd have I could use
But that
some
is,
puns.
that's
But
not going to happen. Yeah.
Understood, but I mean.
Not everything that's been approved will be built. And then there's just the timing and scheduling of any of that. And that's why we're trying to anticipate based on the timelines that we've seen and the growth pattern that we've seen to align with it. You're right, it could happen faster. It could also happen slower.
Alden Caesar.
In order for us to issue a permit to allow a project to come forward, do we issue them a segment of water or sewer?
We do.
We do availability.
Those are the availability.
So at some point, if we don't do this, we could tell a development, we can't have you come in because.
Yeah, and the state requires that we do planning at certain levels. Once we hit certain capacity percentages, that we have planning projected out to meet future growth. And so we're meeting and exceeding that, but that is an expectation as well, that when you get to 85% of capacity, you've planned for how you're going to meet future growth needs. And so our plan helps us do that as well, and has for 15 years.
Keep on.
Okay. This is just the last slide that we've got. So this is more of let's discuss some recommendations. So obviously, we are recommending a 6 MGD facility included with the 2 MGD to advanced treatment. Our current needs are a 4 MGD facility to accommodate the existing approvals, so the 6 would give us a little bit additional planning room to the safe net. So our growth in water and sewer thus far has proceeded according, kind of in line with what we assumed in IWRP. We also assume a facility would be online by 2034. So this provides 10 years of planning capacity beyond the facility startup. But as we talked about that graph, a minimum of 5 of those will be taken up by planning and design. So it doesn't give us 20 years to just hang out and not do anything, right? And then future phasing beyond the initial 4 MGD will require an upgrade to our water plant. We talked about that. That's kind of one of the reasons why we're just going with the 2 MGD at this point. And then we also talked about our current impact fee doesn't cover the cost of a new facility. So we'll have to that'll be future presentations where we'll evaluate.
Your direction on that will feed right into an update of that, both rate plan and impact fee schedule. And, we need to know what we're working towards, what that goal is. So once that's established, we'll be able to complete the rate structure and impact fee structure that ties to the build out that you have directed us to do.
So the 2 comes out of the 4.
Yes. So it would be 2 to the reservoir and 2 to the
2
river.
to the river.
Yep.
If you did 4, yeah.
If you did 4.
If you did 4.
That's a good. It says up to 2.
Yeah.
So does that mean that we're going to get 2 out of the 6 million gallons a day?
So up to 2 is assuming that, provided
Full.
that, yeah.
The reservoir could be full
The reservoir
at a
could
given
be full,
time.
and we may have to kind of adjust flows daily, operationally as needed, but it would be the capacity to treat up to 2 advanced to send to the reservoir.
How many millions of gallons a day that could be treated or could come from 6 million gallons a day of the treatment?
So let's go back to this one. So if we did the 6, so we would be sending 4 to the river and then 2 to the reservoir. So always sending 2. The amount that would fluctuate would be how much to the river.
Understand, but it's not 1 for 1. You don't treat 1 million gallons a day of flow or of total capacity and get 1 million gallons of a reservoir augmentation. There's got to be a rate. You're surely not getting a 1-to-1 ratio of stuff going into the process and then water coming out or treated water coming out. Does that make sense?
When we do startup, we're going to divert flow immediately from the Goose Creek lift station, and then we will have some flow. The plant will be designed and constructed to treat up to 2 MGD of advanced treatment.
So you think we can get that much out of it?
Right. So it really depends on what's coming in. And, I think the best use of water really depends on what the river's doing, and it depends on where we are with respect to water treatment. So those decisions will have to be made as it's really a daily decision. If we can continue to withdraw from the Harpeth River and we don't need to send water to the reservoir, there's a lot of factors that are involved in that. And so I hope that helps, yes.
If you're drawing from the river, you're drawing after the 2 million gallons that you're putting in. So is that not the same thing as what you're asking to do up there when you're saying, I'm going to divert 2 million gallons to the reservoir? I would assume you just put it in the river, letting it flow down for a few hundred yards or a mile or whatever it is, and pump it back out again.
So if we do the advanced treatment, that's a higher water quality than what we would probably go to so we would want to use that water for water treatment purposes in the future.
So that goes directly to the reservoir.
Right. So putting it back in the river, you're kind of diminishing the quality of the water at that point because of background concentrations, and you got all these fish and all of the kinds of other. So we would want to kind of keep that separate. It's going to end up going through really the advanced treatment train. The kind of the more conventional treatment train. If we're going to send water to the reservoir directly, it would end up getting diverted through the advanced treatment train. The rest would go to the river.
So what is your capacity at the water treatment plant now to treat? 2 or 3 million gallons?
It's up to 4 MGD.
It's up to 4?
Yep. Yeah, 3.9-ish.
Your standard is around 2.6. You have 3 trains of 1.3 million each.
Correct.
We typically operate 2 of the 3 at any given time, but we can ramp up and use all 3 should we need to.
And the only reason we use all 3 is because of our current water source.
Yep.
Or we only use 2 is because of we don't have enough water. Like we just can't pull enough from the Harpeth River.
All right. We still got 3 items we have to go to. I want us to bring this back to work session. I think staff is wanting the feedback. We've made a lot of decisions already that gives us the direction that we got to go to 4 or 6 million gallons plant and start figuring out what those impact
I mean,
fees are.
Is the 6 recommendation
I like the
sound
6.
good? Is it at least a starting point? And
I think it sounds good. We got to figure out how to pay for it. But
yeah,
I think that's
so
important.
use that as a base assumption as we do these next steps.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 10 and 11, we're going to consider together, which is a rezoning, and the other one's development plan for, let me just read it. Ordinance 2024-20, an ordinance to rezone 192.688 acres from agricultural district to planned PD. I won't read all those numbers. District probably located west of MacHatcher, east of Old Charlotte Pike East, located 1740 New Highway 96 West. Established a public hearing on October 22nd. Hello, Chelsea. And then the next thing is the development standards with all the modification of standards.
Yes, sir. I will be quick. Armistead PUD development plan and rezoning, they meet the guiding principles of both design concepts, which are conservation subdivision and neighborhood mixed use, along with the special considerations that are in Envision Franklin. The development plan also generally meets the zoning ordinance, apart from the applicant's 9 MOS request, all of which staff is recommending approval of. Approval of or approval with conditions. There are extreme delays in the study area that do not meet the City of Franklin's level of service requirement for traffic. This was discussed with you and FMPC in January and then again in June. Staff was given feedback that there still may be support for the development even with the delays. Separate from this informal feedback, staff's role is to report when projects are not fully addressing our approved development standards, which is why staff has had to recommend disapproval for the project, the development plan, and the rezoning. Both the rezoning and the development plan were recommended for approval by the Planning Commission by a vote of 5-2, and I have a cheat sheet of the MOSs if you guys would like to reference it. I'll pass it out while the mayor directs the next person to speak.
Well put.
Chelsea.
And we do have the developer team here, and also have 2 public speakers that want to speak. So maybe we'll give you a chance. How much time do you need?
Not much.
Okay.
We figured y'all are tired of hearing from us. We've done our best to try to make sure you guys are quite aware of the project. So really, we're here to answer any questions you have. We put together a little handout for you all just as a quick reference for some of the important elements of it. And so, you have anything you want to add?
No, we're here to answer questions. Hopefully, you guys are familiar with what we're trying to do here and what the Shorts are trying to do with that with their farm, and so we're just here to answer questions and provide any any support we can for the project.
You want to hear from Alderman Blanton?
Oh, I just keep going last. I thought I'd go first. I'm just so excited about this. I'm excited about the opportunity for us to be welcoming some creative development projects that we've not seen in our community. I'm excited about just the different types of housing that will give some affordability just through market and size. And yeah, I'm very excited. I was looking at the breakdown and I did have a question. When there was the tiny house component, what is that, the farm compound, or which one is that?
Well, technically, it's a single family home. We're not
Okay.
allowed to. I mean, if there's no tiny home.
Okay.
Sort of, development or building type exactly. So.
Okay.
We have 15% or more, or 15% or less than 40-foot wide lots, and those are where there's tiny homes. So I think they're 23 to 26.
I used the wrong vernacular.
When you look at the illustrative plan, you'll see the color coded here, and it talks about tiny houses, so you can see about the size of the lot here.
Oh, there's the green light. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so the illustrative plan has a designation for tiny house lots. You can see where they are and kind of how big they are in relation to the regular size lots. So they're quite small.
Well, in full disclosure, one of the reasons why I'm so excited is because we went to Serenbe and Trilith, and so having seen what this can actually look like for real and seeing it on paper, I kind of have a little bit of glimpse of what we can expect. So I have no questions.
Vice Mayor.
I'll just second all of that, and just on the traffic, I totally get where staff needs to come from on that. I get it. All I would say in this forum is that is a problem we have to solve for, but as this phases out over time, I will also say, I didn't say this during the road impact conversation, I meant to, is I know our mayor's been working for over a year trying to solve for more help on trying to figure out how we, through the state, get some infrastructure put in place that's going to help where this development's concerned. I think there's also a couple other pathways that are possible over there that we need to continue to work on too, that I think would also alleviate some of that pain. And that's one that I'm taking on to make sure that we kind of see if there's a possibility there to alleviate some of that. But I think it's such a great development. Over the time that this is going to take to put into place and to build and develop, we need to also work on that infrastructure piece, and I think that's on us to do.
Alderman Baggett.
I think my quick comment, and I think that Harlan folks did this, and you may have, Brian showed me this the first time. I think the public actually needs to see these too. You know how we typically see these development plans and it has the lots colored and stuff? Sometimes, but like, those are all gonna be front and backyards in there too, you know, and it's yellow. The lots are yellow, but we've seen like, and I think you showed me that. Actually, I know you did, where this shows the house that's black, and then it shows you still see the lot lines, but it shows more of the green space. I mean, the green space that's not technically green space because it's a front and backyard, but I think we're going to have to continue to do that with our agricultural developments so that people see, because some people look at this and think, oh, well, the public might think like, oh, that's paved or this, no, that's actually a yard, and it'll be, a neighborhood yard. So, I mean, this is not anything mandatory or contingent upon approval, but I think that would be really helpful too, as we continue to project this to the public and they review this. So, thank you.
Anybody else? Alderman Potts.
Yeah, I think the design of the proposed development does look great. I reiterate what the other aldermen have said. I do have concerns though about the traffic, and I want staff to know that that's being heard. I know that we think that we may be able to get somewhere with TDOT and other funds, but I am very concerned knowing what Alderman Baggett has said, Alderman Brown has said about the traffic in that area previously, and how this is going to add to that with 321 single family, 42 townhomes. And you can run down the full list here. I have concerns about the traffic.
Okay, I've got two speakers. I've got Dorinda Smith and I have Monica Neubauer. So,
Mayor, Ms. Neubauer sent an email that said she had to step out.
oh, okay, and I know I received the email, and everybody will have that for the record. Dorinda, we'll send you wherever you want to speak.
I got sent here.
Oh, did you? I didn't see that.
Dorinda Carlisle Smith, 1049 Carlisle Lane, former next door neighbor to the Shorts. I'm not going to deny that connection. Wonderful project, very excited, very much support it. Don't get excited about the traffic. I've sat through the 5 or 6 times through the traffic light trying to cross Hillsborough Road. Can't say I'm excited about that. But an agri-hood that pays homage to the heritage of this community back when I was a kid, totally worth it. A community that actually is going to provide education on a day-to-day basis for our children on where food comes from, totally worth it. A community that really addresses sustainability in an innovative and exciting way, worth it. And something that's going to add to the wholesome community for Franklin, totally worth it.
Okay, we'll go to item number 12, which is resolution amending Gateway Village PUD subdivision revision 7 to extend the vested rights for the property located west of Franklin Road, south of Linwood Way, located 120 Davenport Boulevard. Established a public hearing October the 8th. Joey.
That's an old vesting word, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
We're experts now.
Yeah,
We've
we're
got this
we're keeping
presentation.
the trend going here. Yes, this is for a vesting extension for 18 months for the Gateway Village PUD subdivision. This is for their last building on that for that development, and they just need a little bit more time to get their permits. Their site plan for that building was approved as of last week, so they're just requesting 18 more months.
Everybody good with that? Okay, we'll see you back in approximately 10 minutes.
Not hit 13, 14, 15, huh?